Okay, hi Nate. Thank you for agreeing to talk with me again. I absolutely love your work. Nate is a Milab victim and a targeted individual, and also he is a disclosure activist. So he is propelling a lot of the truth and his experiences to help other people, I presume, well, that's what I think. And yeah, I just wanted to, have a chat about your experiences and how we can help other people and solutions, and things like that. And yeah, just welcome.
Well, thank you for having me, Rose. I appreciate it, and I enjoyed our first conversation and our private one we had after that too. So,
Yes.
and anyway, I wanted to start by talking about being a targeted individual just a little bit. I want to touch on it. I just got over being really, really sick for quite a while. It started about mid-December, and it wasn't just me; it was me, the person that I would call my psychic mentor, who you've met, his significant other,
Okay.
his psychic mentor, and another friend of ours. Actually, two friends. We've got one friend that took the thing in the arm, and she's sick from that, but is also having other targeted related stuff and MyLab stuff. And then we have another friend who didn't take that, but she's dealing with a similar situation. And we also all have the LC word, the long C,
What
which
is
the long C. Well, there's the short C, which came out in what 2020 that everybody got sick with.
oh, okay. Yep,
Right.
yep.
And then for some of us, you get the long version of it, which doesn't go
Oh,
away. So
okay.
so I've had the long version. It started December. It was like between December and New Year's of 2020, just before 2021 happened.
Mhm.
And I've been sick with it since then. My friends have been sick with it roughly around that time. So it's for me, it's been a little longer. I would say close to 3 years now because we're in 2024. So and what was interesting is that when mid-December happened, we got about second week of December of this past year, we all got worse. And
Mm.
that's when it became evident that this was frequency based, and there's more to it than what you would think, because there's and I got to watch what I say because of the situation here, but there's something called graphene oxide, and graphene oxide is used to make nanites and which you would call nanobots or nanomachines, and these things are partially declassified. And they can put the graph. What they're doing is they have various delivery systems for the graphene oxide nanoparticles. I guess you could call them smart dust. I don't know if that's a separate thing, but it is in a sense the same thing, in my opinion, because it does very similar things. And it's in the chemtrails. It's probably being put in agricultural products. We know it's in the thing that, the arm thing. So, and that's been looked at under a microscope, and then they've applied frequencies to this, and it's difficult to find this information, but it's out there. And they've applied frequencies to where these nano machines activate because they're made out of, the graphene oxide. So what we concluded is that because we all got long COVID, and when I noticed too, by attending MyLab support groups and talking to people, that there's a substantially disproportionate number of targeted individuals in MyLabs that have the long C. And it's not normal at all. You can't substantiate when you have like 60-70% sometimes or more, and everyone's dealing with it to one degree or another. It isn't a coincidence. It's too much disproportion. I mean, because out of the whole population, I don't know how many people that they've counted, because they don't like to keep accurate records of this, but it's nothing like that percentage. And because we all got sick at the same time, it was obvious that there was something connecting it all. And I'm just curious if there's anybody out there who's watching this video, if you have noticed around that same time an increase in symptoms or anything like that, please post it in here and like in the comment section, so that I can see it, because I'm going to take this matter later to Misha Johnson's support group, and probably the next few weeks, and ask, because I haven't been there in a while, and I just wanted to see if anybody else had noticed an increase in symptoms. And it's numbness in the face. I was getting pain across my face. And then I recently got sick with it. And there's another thing too. The majority of my friends in my inner circle all got sick with the short C, roughly with the same week. And it was almost the same time. And I know that, and of course that worsens the symptoms every time you get another layer of it, and you get the short C after you've already had the long C. Your symptoms kind of compound one another and they get worse. So the neurological problems get worse. So there is some things you can do about this, especially with the nanoparticles, and to get the graphene oxide out of your system. So if anybody's curious about that, at the end of the video and in the video's description, I'll have my email address, because if I say it here, it'll be a reason to take the channel down. I'm not, well, so much, you could probably take the channel down eventually, but it would take the video down, and I want to upload this on my channel. So I don't want any issues between either of us and having our channels attacked by the sensors.
Yeah.
So, and it's a little tiny thing you can get on Amazon, and different, wherever you live. It's just to give you a clue. It's used in ant bait and it's used in laundry detergent, but it's safe to take in tiny little quantities. And it's made out of an actual mineral, so it's not a harmful thing. And those are actually made for people to take. So you're not taking something that's crazy, but it does work. It took me about 5 days. And this actually came from the QAnon movement. That's where the information came from. So, I've been a skeptical person about that, kind of a skeptic about that whole movement, but because there's a lot of disinfo and it's difficult to weed through it. But obviously they know what you're talking about, because I've actually been able to get rid of the brain fog, some of the induced speech impairment problems that they've given me. Memory issues has really, really cleared up, and a lot of the body pain, at least for now, is subsided, because I was having pretty severe neurological issues. And so same with my friends. I mean, my one friend's significant other can barely get out of bed sometimes, and that's not just the long C and then the recent short C, but it's also a bioweapon that they were hit with using a Dragonfly drone, which is a partially declassified technology. They can take a insect, usually a sizable insect, and they can put an undercarriage on it to deploy like a weapon system. It could be nanites, it could be something else. It's usually a biological agent, and they can cybernate it, so they can put electronics inside and make a cyborg out of the bug. So the bug is like a living robot, or they can build a miniaturized one with solar powered wings that can be deployed indefinitely, up to a certain point, because it has to be charged. It can't, there's certain conditions where it's not going to function, but they use it for reconnaissance, and they use it to deploy these types of weapon systems. So you could literally be sitting someplace out in the woods or on a nature hike, and if you're targeted, they can fly one of these drones up to you, and you'll get you'll have a dragonfly hang around you in an unusual way, or some other large bug, and then you'll start getting sick. And this was done to oh god, I don't know this guy's name. He's an expert in the Sumerian clay tablets. Damn it,
Billy Carson? No,
not him. Billy replaced him actually within this group of people.
Okay.
I can't think of his name off the top of my head. I just, but if I think about it, I'll mention it. But his wife Krista did a video, and she talked to my friend. I tried to reach out to her, and I made a video about it too. And she believes her husband was killed by one of these drones, because she saw it, and it made it was a mechanical sound to it. And so she made a video about it, and what it was is her husband rapidly died in about 6 months from a very fast moving cancer, and he was a vegan. And what my friends found is doing research, is that apparently, based on his case, that if you're a vegan and you get hit with this, it's much, much worse, because whatever the reason is, because I don't know if it's you don't have enough minerals or whatever, or something.
B12. Yeah.
Possibly, I don't know, but being a vegan really made him susceptible to the cancer aspect of it. And his name is Gerald Clark, and his wife is Krista Clark. So he's written several books, and Billy Carson basically replaced him. So as soon as as soon as, Gerald was out of the picture, Billy started to move in. So another whole nother story. But yeah, we believe he was murdered. His wife does too. And this has to do with because there, prior to that, hasn't been too many people gaining that much traction in the past who connected the Anunnaki story to the elites and these families that are basically own the banking system, the old family lines that go back to ancient times, the bloodlines. So he was connecting it together in the world government thing and tying it all together with the negative ET presence and, cross-referencing everything. And because of that and possibly other reasons, he was targeted to get rid of. So that's one of the things that they do. So now I want to get into my situation. Well, do you have any questions first?
I just, because you were talking about bloodlines and the Anunnaki and how the genetics have been manipulated in the humanity. And I actually have like this really good book by Wes Penry. Because he has done a lot of research on genetics. Like he has done really a lot. He's got like 5 papers online that he published for free, but he also has some books about what's going on. And that recent book that he's published is really good. I think it kind of explains the scenario of what's happened here in a sense that like recent history and past ancient history ties in together very well. And yeah, it's in-depth information about the genetics of people basically. And I don't want to say it's like a racist thing, but there are different genetics on Earth. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it isn't. They like to make it into a racist thing, but it isn't. We all have genetics. We all come from different places, and the soul's the same. Well, there's a level of inequality in the souls as well, but as far as human beings are concerned, we're all the same. So people they want division anyway. Sorry.
That's it. Yeah, they do. Ultimately, we're still human, but it just goes to show like what they want within their stupid hierarchy system thing that they've got going on. Yeah, because Royal,
I'm sorry. I was going to ask, does he talk about the elongated skull people, the Paracas skull people, and because they appear to be the hybrids. I don't know if that was what they referred to as the Nephilim, but I know those were the hybrids, and that's why. And they had the royal positions in ancient societies for a long time, and that's why people did head binding of children to emulate them. And they're actually DNA was done on those Paracas skulls, and they found that they are a missing chapter of humanity. They're actually compatible genetically, but they're different, and they have the genes to make themselves different. So it's not a mutation or something abnormal about them. That that was a different race of people with those elongated skulls, and they have the cranial capacity was 25% larger on average than a regular Homo sapien.
Yeah,
but you can tell that that I'm going to give them all the credit that's due. The quackademics do not want to talk about this, which is a telltale sign that it has to do with the ET presence. That's why they're completely silent on it. And you hear about Lucy and other primates and things like that, and they make a big deal about that and talk about evolution and stuff. But then when it comes to something like this, that's an anomaly, then they're silent on it.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's very interesting because obviously we have all sorts of things with DNA and genetics happening within our race or species, whatever you want to call it. And they're just not wanting to pair up everything. Like, it's ridiculous. Not even open-minded to explore the fact that we have different genetics. Do you know what I mean? So, yeah.
I'm going to try to keep it down here. It's late. So I'll set my wife upstairs, but yeah, she just got up. So anyway,
sorry.
Yeah, I hear her walking across the ceiling here because I'm down in the basement. I'm not in Egypt in a tomb. Actually, if I was, it'd probably be more fun to do it that way.
I'd love to go to Egypt. Yeah, you've got a good setup there. I love your backdrop. Yeah.
Yeah, you can get it on eBay if you want one. $50.
I'd love to hang it on the wall or something. Yeah.
Yeah, well, this is a frame back here, so it's a photography. It's a two tripods and a pole that goes across with some spring clips, and then you just buy different, ones. I got a couple of them, and I
Oh,
just
really?
every so often I'll switch them up. But this one looks the best so far, and
Yeah,
the
I
other
like that
one, and I have one where it looks like I'm sitting at in front of the Great Pyramid, like behind it.
one. Oh,
But it's
yeah,
like
I
all
think.
these blocks and stuff.
Yep, yep. I think I've seen one of your videos with that. Yeah.
Yeah, I've been looking for something cheery though, and or something angelic, but I can't find what I'm looking for, so I'm stuck with this. I got a slow
No,
computer.
that's awesome. That's yeah.
Yeah, it is cool though, but it gets old though. After a while, I like to switch it up. But anyway, um, so what do you want to talk about? You want to get into the whole situation of how I figured out this crap about myself that I've been dealing with my whole life?
Yeah, I wanna know, like, what triggered you into understanding that it applied to you, or was it, like maybe it wasn't research? Maybe because in my circumstance, like, I do a little research and then I apply it to my own experience kind of thing, but I don't have active memories like you. And I just wanted to know, like, how did you understand this applied to you? Like, through discernment or, like,
Okay,
how do
that's a
you
good question.
Yeah.
Well, from the very beginning, since I was a child, and I can't pinpoint the time that I recalled this, but I have a memory, and the memory it began like I was in a room of some kind that had a white haze in it, and I referred to it as a white room memory. Because I think there may have been some talk about a white room in the Truman Cash books, The Eye of Ra and a Programming of the Planet. It may have been something with a Milab case or something that may have gotten that name, but or that term for it. But it was a white room, but it wasn't really white. What they were doing is that it was an actual memory that they gave me back, and one of the things that we need to talk about just real quick before I start this is that, and I want to lay this out for people. So this is extremely important. So please listen to this. We have a community of people in my labs and SSP survivors. These are people that most of them are actively still in the programs and are being used. These are people who have been hijacked through alien, joint military alien abductions, and that their souls have been hijacked. Their consciousness is hijacked. You can do 20, 30 and back, whatever. But there's a lot to this. So every single alien abduction that takes place on this planet is a Milab abduction, a joint military ET abduction. Nobody gets taken without the elites knowing it, and the military combine. I used to call it the Draco Military Alliance, but basically what it is. And it's not just Dracos. There's a lot of different alien ET groups, non-human and human, that are involved in this. They all get a piece of the action, and they're all exploiting humanity. So, what I was saying is that yeah, kind of lost my train of thought for a second there. But anyway, getting back to the abduction aspect of this. um, oh no, yeah, I know what I was going to talk about. Sorry, I apologize. It's late here, guys. So
I'm so sorry.
people in this community are waking up and remembering things. And what I found and if you do any research, there's certain exceptions, where people are remembering things on their own because they can't keep this from you completely. Something's going to bleed through at some point. Okay, so and there's positive forces that are helping people remember as well.
Yes.
And but for the majority of it, is that the programs, the ETs and the military groups that run the programs understand that there's going to be people that are going to wake up no matter what they do, and that there's an effort, a concerted effort by a positive extraterrestrial presence to help these people remember, because they want to expose this. So what they've done is that they've co-opted these people. So the ones that are waking up, instead of like letting them, letting them kind of go rogue in a sense, what they're doing is they're inducing the memory recall in people. That's why these memories are
Mhm.
so detailed and so vast. And what it does is it does several things. One of which is it puts the person into a perpetual cycle of anomalous trauma recovery. So they're constantly dealing with this, and it causes post-traumatic stress disorder and a host of other problems. And that can weaken someone. You can get physically sick from it. And of course, they can make you sick with the nanites. And there's another way to do this as well, which I'll get into in a little while. But so they're making these people remember, and they've engineered it's basically a controlled stream of disclosure. And what they do is that one of the things that happens with people who have like really intense memory recall is that they will have screen memories implanted in there. So, in this memory that I'm talking about now is actually, in a sense, a screen memory because it was altered, but it wasn't, but there was more to it. And I'll get into that. But they put screen memories into people. So you have somebody that says, "Yeah, I've been abducted by aliens and this and that, and I've had this all these things happen." And then they say, "Yeah, and I remember being in the program, and I could mutate myself into a teenage mutant ninja turtle." And I'm saying this because there's actually people that are claiming to be the real Wolverine from Marvel Comics or whatever it is. They're claiming they can create nuclear explosions using psychic abilities, and
Yeah.
they're saying these things. Now, these people, most of them, okay, there's always going to be the frauds out there and the people that are mentally sick or have something to prove. Um, the ones that are actually legitimately remembering this are remembering what they think is a real memory, but it's put in there to discredit to discredit them. So they're talking about all this other stuff and maybe 80, 90, 95% true. But then you get into something that's totally off the wall. And they also do something else in this community too, is that if there's people they don't want to talk, they will make it to where the others in the community shun them and won't talk to them. And then you kind of cornered, like I was for some time. I started to try to go public in 2008, and it wasn't until I started doing my own, videos, which I struggled through because of the psychic attacks that were taking place and the physiological interruptions with my speech and my thoughts and my thought processes and memory and stuff. And so all those things were being done to me. So it made it extremely difficult. But that was the only way that I could get my story out to expose what they're doing to some of us, because I have pieces of the puzzle that the community at large doesn't want to talk about. You've interviewed Eve Lorgan, and
Yes.
I've become friends with her, and because there's a lot that's happened to her that has happened to me. And these are subjects, these are things like satanic cults, ritual abuse, and things like that, as well as the love bites and things that the community, the new age community, and the people that are deeply entrenched in that, especially those and the ones who are also into the ET contactee and the channeling stuff, they don't want to talk about it. Mainstream podcasters don't want to talk about SRA abuse. They don't want to talk about the love bite stuff. They don't want to talk about negative extraterrestrials. So they want to keep people like myself in a box and keep us to the fringe. And a good example, if you go on any of the whistleblowers' testimonies on YouTube and you type in, "I'm a Milab victim, I've been abducted by by negative ETs, and come check out my channel where I can tell you about it," or "I've been a victim in these programs," and there's a lot more to it than what these whistleblowers are talking about, because most of these people are blowing these whistles are actually, somewhat, there, a lot of them are working for the government. It's a psyop to a certain extent. So if you type any of that stuff in any one of these underneath these videos, they will take down your comment. The AI is literally programmed to censor abduction victims in my labs under any one of these testimonial videos from these so-called whistleblowers, who, by the way, haven't told us anything that Stephen Greer has not said 20 years ago. The reverse engineering garbage and everything else that they want you to believe that, they think that they're doing some reverse engineering. And, but most of the disclosure is about, well, I saw a UFO and I made a report and I got some grainy video, and then that's it. And they want to keep you there because they don't want you to know what they're doing to people. I wanted to mention one other thing too about this targeting that's extremely important. So I've laid out that, they're engineering a disclosure right now using the MyLabs, and these are mind-controlled MyLabs, and they use alters. A lot of people, and I had them too, they will have alters that are functioning simultaneously while they're living their lives. They've got alters on different timelines or different geographic places. They could be on different planets, could be on the same timeline.
Yeah.
And they use these alters to affect the societal placeholder, which is they need you alive in society. And then they use you to animate these alters and they can abduct or remote, and actually, once they've fractured you, they can fracture your alters and actually create more clones and use the soul fragments to animate them. And all of them tie back to you through silver life force cores, like the ones that people report seeing when they have an OBE.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, if you've got fractured soul shards, whatever you want to call that, soul fragments, and they're animating clones, you've got a silver cord that connects to you, that's connected to you, and then it's connected to your clone, and then there's a network of it. It's on the astral or the etheric.
Yeah.
The silver cords are one of the ways that they isolate Milabs in the Milab community. If you can see these on the astral, you'll see a network like a spider's web. When you make a connection with someone like myself and you, for example, you create a very thin filament on the astral. It's a silver cord, and it represents a connection from from two consciousnesses. So you can, you can break that connection. Like if you have like an ex you're trying to get rid of, you finally just sever it, and okay, we're done. We both agree that's it, and you go your separate ways. Then it breaks because there's no longer an interest. But what they do is they can use these using a transdimensional AI technology and actually create a cord that prevents people from talking. In other words, they can they can also program people subconsciously through it's a type of a thought form energy that's programmed that can be attached to you. It's like remote hypnosis in a sense, or remote. It's really remote influencing. So they can give you a negative feeling about somebody. So they can isolate people like that. So I dealt with that extensively, and I still deal with it now.
Yeah.
A lot of the people in the Milab community and so forth, even though I've been on different podcasts and have interviewed, I interviewed Max Spear's mom. I've done stuff at the Farsight Institute. They still won't put me on their show, and they don't want me to talk. And it's not necessarily because they have something against me. It's just they have an aversion at a subconscious level to where they don't want to talk to me. And if I approach them, I won't get responses. So it's still like that. And it's also like that due to the stuff that I talk about. People aren't beating the door down to talk to James Bartley and Eve Lorgan, who talk about a lot of the same stuff, the negative side of this whole phenomenon and the government involvement and the Satanism and everything else. That's taboo in this whole subculture, this disclosure community.
I know. Yep.
So anyway, getting that out of the way, to answer your question, I had this memory. It was in a white haze. And I started to, well, for one, I knew that it made me different because the people around me didn't, and I knew this was a past life memory. So I had all that context of it, and I thought it was heaven because it was in a white light haze. But I couldn't make out, I knew it was a room, but I couldn't make the surroundings out too well. But I knew that there was other people there. It was like 3 different people besides for me. And I got inside something, like something enclosed around me that was technological, that put me into the body of a fetus at the 12th week of conception. And the reason for that is the 12th week of conception in the human body is usually it's generally when the brain activity begins. And once the brain activity starts, if a soul's not put in that body, it generates a new soul. A new soul's born because it creates a memory within the source consciousness or God's mind. And that consciousness that because of the brain activity, the self-awareness that takes place can give birth to a soul, or they have to put one in. So in my case, they put me in this body before there was a consciousness present. And I was a soul fragment of basically a fragment of a fragment, which I'll get into in a moment. So this particular memory, over the course of my life growing up, it was the foundation of my belief system. So it gave me the proof there was life after death. I had many different sporadic psychic events that built up over the years throughout my childhood. Now I also had abductions too. And the thing with abductions is that most people who have been abducted don't even realize it. I didn't think I was ever abducted. I'd watch shows about it. And I'm thinking, well, if I was abducted, then I would remember something, because it's like, and then you go and they show you people go under hypnosis and they remember everything. And they don't talk about how difficult that is and how traumatic that is. They don't give you any of the details of what it's really about. So they give you a false sense of what this is. So you disassociate yourself from it. And you don't want to believe that about yourself anyway, but I kept having these psychic abilities, and I knew that somebody was turning my psychic abilities on and turning them off, and I didn't have control over it. I had that going on, and I had this memory, and then I had the psychic events. But what was interesting is that when I got to my teenage years, I started having flashbacks that built upon the memory that I had from the past life in that white room. And the memories were clearer. And now I'm starting to see there's a desk, there's objects, there's, physical solid objects that, that I can't make out what they are, but I know they're tables, and I know there's a computer screen involved, and there's all this other stuff. So, it was always a question in my mind, what was that? So for me, I always thought maybe this is a good thing, but, because I know there's life after death. So I never feared death for that reason. But so I kind of built on it. And then when I started having the flashbacks, they were in consecutive order. So they were in order of the events that took place. And eventually I wound up doing a hypnosis session. And in the hypnosis session, I didn't get a lot, but what it did do is it broke through the programming and allowed me to realize that this room, this place that I remembered, was not on another planet. It was not in heaven. It was actually at the White Sands military base. And I'm not talking about the missile test range. I'm talking about, the underground military base that's on the west side of the valley where they test the missiles at. There's a mountain range that separates the White Sands missile test range and a city that's on the other side of the mountains. And that is where all this was stemming from. That's where that memory came from. And I was able to see this room clearly and see what it was. And they actually had a soul transference system, a machine that actually did that. That would fracture your consciousness and implant it into a body remotely anywhere on any timeline or anywhere they needed to put it. Because we're just conscious energy. So, everything is consciousness. So because of that, and you have the right technology, then anything's pretty much possible within the parameters of God's will. And, this is apparently, unfortunately, happening. So anyway, in this memory, there was 3 beings in there that were identified later as being Haujean, which is where my Haujean Contactee name comes from. They're about just under 8 feet tall. They have they have like a golden brown skin. They have black hair. They have cat eyes that are like a dark brown color, but they have the cat cat pupils, the slits, not the reptilian style, but the more of the kind of a wider slit like a cat. It's a little bit different than a reptilian eye. Anyway, they were actually Dracos. They were Dracos. They're from a Draco soul group that were using the Haujean container bodies at the military base. Because we're not dealing with races of ETs so much that we were dealing with soul groups that can change their bodies and be whatever they want when they need to for whatever reason. So I'm in this room, I'm standing there, and I'm arguing with them because there's a problem, and I'm not happy with it. And I was supposed to be a teacher. And what I was really supposed to be, and this is where the controversy comes in, what my testimony is that I was supposed to be, what they had done is that they had abducted me in a previous lifetime in the state of Nevada in 1950, I believe it was 1953, because it was I was 7 and I was born in 40, I think it was 54. I was born in 47, and I was abducted at age 7. When I got to age 27, they terminated that version of me, and they had alters in the program. So what I was remembering in this situation, it was in this soul transference lab, is that they were taking one of my alters, which was an alter from my original incarnation here, where I was hijacked, and they were fracturing that consciousness and creating me. Now, I don't know if they'd already terminated the placeholder version of me, the original version, which is, and from what my understanding is, that's the seat of the higher self. So I don't know if that part of me had already been terminated, and probably had, I guess, but I don't know. But that fragment from that particular altar became me. That's what I remember. And I was put into a fetus at the 12th week of conception. And
Right.
little did I know, I thought this was a pre-birth memory. I didn't know what
Mm,
it was and why I was having it. But, later, as I realized that I was a Milab, it sounds a lot like Max Spears. It sounds a lot like some of these other people. And they've identified this particular program as Project Surrogate, because they're literally taking a soul and putting it into a surrogate mother, and then creating a placeholder, which then they can pick from and abduct and create more altars. And they can also, this is where things get really controversial. I kind of skipped over that, is that I said I was going to be a teacher. The reason is that what I was going to be teaching is I was going to be a new age guru. So this
oh
is where
yeah.
it get really bizarre, because what I figured out and what I found out was, and I'm skipping around here a bit, but people that are used in the new age community, a lot of these people are Milabs, and they'll talk about being abducted. Talk about how some of them will even talk about how great it was to be abducted. Like they have great relationships with their abductors. Now, there's other people that are, have a kind of a situation where they've been abducted, and then they have what they call an abduction rescue scenario, where a handsome male or female, or a beautiful female or handsome male, usually a Palladian or some perfected human species, comes in and saves them, and then makes them a spokesperson for the Galactic Federation. There's quite a few women out there that have been put in these breeding programs that are being used by Project Ibis, which is the one that is doing this. This is the big umbrella program that is responsible for the Milabs and the New Age community, as well as a lot of the satanic cults that are online, and the satanic covens and stuff like that. It's all under a big umbrella program that's a joint military Draco program.
Mm,
When you start talking about this and you start saying that, it's just like, okay, now you've just pissed off so many people in this community, because you're telling them that their tarot cards and their spirit guides and their pagan gods and their Anunnaki, that they're having the wool pulled over their eyes. They're being duped, and that
yeah.
is a joint extraterrestrial negative ET military program. So
Hmm.
I was told, I was promised that I was supposed to be, um, what was going to be the societal placeholder, which was me, was supposed to be one of these gurus, born in 1974, and then kind of grew up, and then was supposed to write books, because that was before the internet, and then I was supposed to kind of move into the social media sphere and become an influencer into my later years, like so many other people you've seen out there. And
Yeah.
I was promised a guy a TV contract. I mean, literally, this all happened later, which I'll get to, but they literally have created a system where the people involved in it don't even know what they're serving, and don't even know what they're doing and why they're
Mm,
doing all of this, in creating this community, but it's been engineered. And
mhm,
from not just engineered by the negatives, but the positives too. So it's, there's a tug of war going on there, just like with governments, just like with politics and everything else. They're above them, above the elites, you have extraterrestrial puppet masters. Above the extraterrestrials, you have a demonic hierarchy and an angelic hierarchy. The best way you could describe this, and this is from, Farsight Institute, for example, is that they remote viewed George Lucas and found that his inspiration for Star Wars came from subconscious memories that were bleeding through, that he couldn't identify as being like, memories of past lives, but they were
mm,
ideas. They were coming to him as ideas, and he created this story of Star
yeah.
Wars.
Yeah.
And so, and in that story, you have what I think it's the Sith, and you have the Jedi. So you have the good and the bad, and they represent, in a sense, the angelic and the demonic. These are very advanced extraterrestrials. The angelics, the best way to describe them is as how they're described in theology, is that they're the closest thing to God, to the God consciousness as you can get, that they become proxies and lose part of their free will. And then you
Mm,
have the demonic ones that have broken away from that for self-serving purposes, but they lose some of that strength and ability because they're not carrying out God's will anymore. They're actually contrary to God's will. So therefore, they're lesser than their former angelic counterparts. I hate using these terms because they're theological and they confuse people. But yes, there is angels and demons, and they're, and it's different species of extraterrestrials. The hierarchy can live amongst the ET races as well as the human race in their body containers, and they often do. And there's councils on both sides of this. And so anyway, to answer your question, getting back to all that stuff is I had a series of events, and I had this memory, and it built upon it. And then I started having abductions, which I later remembered. But how it all came to a head is quite bizarre. But, you know, I will get into my, you know what? Actually, I forgot to make one point. Would you like me to go back to the targeted individual stuff real quick? I don't want to get people scatterbrained here. And as I'm kind of scatterbraining this whole thing,
I don't know.
I wanted to make a point. So hold the thought on the Milab stuff and all that and the negative ETs, because the point that I wanted to make early on in the beginning of this video is that the system of targeting that's being used on Milabs and on targeted individuals, because, you know, not every Milab is a targeted individual, but not every targeted individual is a Milab. Okay. So they've got people that they select out at random to go after and hit with directed energy weapons and things, and voice to skull and things like that, and nanites. But there's also people they have people that are randomly picked. They have people they're specifically targeting because of the type of soul they have. And then you have people that are, you know, political problems for the establishment that they go after, you know. So this all, and, you know, we've all heard of the social credit score that they want to implement, and they've done it in China, and the World Economic Forum wants to make it a global thing. So they're telling you that if you don't agree with their agenda and you don't listen and you open your mouth and you express that they're going to take away your freedoms, and they're going to sanction you in society. They're going to take away your right to buy food, to work, to travel. All these things will be increasingly clamped down to the point where you either submit to the state or you die if they don't kill you first. Okay. And they're talking about monitoring thought, so that there's thought crimes. So now they can get you for things you're thinking that you don't express. So there's no way out of this. And when people accept the chips and they get tied into the, you know, the big AI system that they want to create, you know, that's when you're going to see the rollout of this technology that they're using to target people with. So the directed energies, you know, the nanites to make you sick, the directed energy weapons, the harassment from the voice to skull tech, which can be done at a transdimensional level or a more conventional technological level, which was somewhat declassified. We have, you know, there's the Apple product, the Apple glasses that you can wear that have a voice to skull technology. I think it's a microwave or whatever. They can make your inside of your head like a resonant speaker chamber, so you can hear things, but you don't hear it with your ears. That's the low tech version. They have synthetic telepathy that's done. They have much intense stuff than that. So all of that's going to be implemented as part of the social credit score, as part of the whole system of control. It's going to have an otherworldly, godly type of effect to it. So I want people to understand that everything that they're doing to people like myself, they're going to be doing to everybody. That's the plan.
Yes.
To needed to stress that. And I apologize for not getting that point out. And if I made that point earlier and I did it again, I apologize for that too, because it's late. So getting back to the Milab stuff. You know, was there anything that you wanted to ask about that?
No, I was going to say, Wes Penry also talks about that as well, the singularity. Basically, what you're saying is, like, you know, all the things that you've been targeted with, they want to implement it worldwide for everyone. So there's no escape for their plans. They're literally doing it. Like, it's already, I mean, this is what the Karuna is about anyway. I mean, like, everything's working from home these days. I mean, that was their first step to all this, I think.
Well, there's many steps prior to that, but I mean,
I mean,
you know, the war on terror was one step. 9/11 was another, which is the war on terror. That was a catalyst for that. And they're just, you know, the UN, you could go back to that. You could go back to the Bilderberg Group, World Economic Forum, the Royal Society, Council on Foreign Relations. Yeah, they've been building this thing for a long time. They've built networks of generational Satanists as well that are related to the bloodlines. And they have people that are in elite positions, and then it filters down into the common folk. And in some of these people, a lot of these people, and the commoners are the ones that are put in these satanic ritual abuse scenarios and programs and things like that.
Well, because a lot of the commoners have the real royal, bloodline. That's the thing.
Yeah, they're targeting those two, that and other things too. And there's also another factor here, which I'm going to get into right after I got to blow my nose for a second.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Didn't really come out, but it's there. So anyway.
Oh no.
Yeah, it's like a cliffing. It kind of comes back up. It's like silly putty,
Oh, that's terrible.
Yeah, it's just part of the health problems. I've had 7 sinus surgeries too, because they make you sick in every way they can.
I know.
So anyway, what was I just talking about? I'm sorry.
The targeting, and how they want to implement it to everyone.
Yeah, but there was one other thing there. I was going to talk about. I was talking about the satanic ritual abuse stuff, but what else was I going to say? That's the question. Is we'll just shift gears and get into that. We were discussing that for a moment. I was talking about the underlings to the these particular families, and it just kind of goes down, and it the genes. Oh, I got it now. There's a difference in some people's souls, which is why they're targeting. They're basically targeting 2 types of souls. There's the angelic ones, and then there's the extraterrestrial ones. Now there's actually a lot more going on here. When I learned in the programs from because most of what I remember, I've got a little bit of memory that covers the program aspect, but most of what I've been through and when I talk about are things that I've experienced in my own life now that were done through 15 plus years of telepathy that was coming out of this White Sands underground facility by negative extraterrestrials. Okay, so they told me that 1/3 of the human population has a soul from elsewhere. The 2/3 are native to the planet, basically kept here as prisoners, like a host to a parasite. And at the 1/3 that comes in here in what they call engineered lifetimes, they also refer to Milabs, the placeholder, the societal placeholder, such as myself and anyone who's a Milab victim. They consider that to be an engineered lifetime because the 3 beings or ETs that were in that room when I had the soul transference done, they were life engineers, and I had contact with several of them, later in life, and it was very negative. At some point, it became very, very negative, but it was always negative to a point where I didn't really realize what was going on with me. I was under a false pretext. So anyway, it's just like hard to get my mind to work when I'm tired like this. But anyway, yeah, there's different types of souls. And the ones that are coming here, that 33% or whatever, 1 in 3 are actually these are people that live in different ET cultures, most of whom reach a point of mental illness, as they was explained to me, to where by cloning their bodies and living in perpetual adulthood, they become mentally ill because there's not a rebirth process going on. Okay. So you're not going through the aging process. You're not being reborn. You're just kind of in a steady state. And a lot of these cultures and societies are quite fucked up like this one, and they're influencing this world. And the people that are coming here are not like, the best people. They're just no different than anybody else. And a lot of them come from very, very authoritarian, an authoritarian world, a government that's authoritarian. But and depending on how much is paid, either by their government or by them, however that works, whatever system of trade that they have between these different cultures, they can get a higher pecking order in society. So they can spend more and get, they could be a wealthy person, or they can just barely get in and be put into a state of poverty, whatever, but then they'll engineer the experience for that person. So if they feel that, if it's best to make them sick, they want to give them cancer and maybe their life's going to be short, like that'll really humble them or give them more empathy, whatever the case is, they will put them through something like that, just like they do with the Milab. So that's the bigger bulk part of the ET presence that's in human bodies. But then you have the ones that are coming in here to infiltrate that are working against the hijackers of humanity, which is primarily Draco, but there's plenty of others involved in it. And a lot of the ones that are involved in are actually slaves to the Draco and slaves to these other negative ETs. Some of them can be insectoids. The Greys definitely are all biological slaves. It used to be people. They weren't programmed life forms. They destroyed an entire civilization through an absolute act of war. It was a Holocaust. It's been reviewed by the Farsight Institute. And they captured the souls of the majority of these people, and they put them into these biological android container bodies that we refer to as the Greys, and that limits their consciousness. So that takes away their sense of who they are and their emotional capacity, and makes them basically slaves that commit terrible acts against others, such as human beings. And they're victims themselves. And some of these insectoids as well, the same thing. They're doing work for the Draco and other negative groups, and they've been hijacked and put into this situation. So, so that's basically what's going on. And then you have these soul groups coming in here. Some of these angelics and some of these ET souls are going into the bloodlines to be disruptors. So they're targeted as well. You hear that a lot, when you get really into this, you start realizing that, somebody was born into a bloodline, but they actually have extraterrestrial memories and things like that. So there's much more to this than meets the eye. So do you have any questions up to this point?
Oh, no, it's good. No, I'm listening.
Okay, I'm just kind of, like I said, it's late for me, so it's kind of,
yeah,
I'm like moving
so
off this cup of coffee. So if I mix things up a little bit and I'm jumping around, I do apologize for it.
No, it's okay.
So anyway, getting back to my situation, I had this memory inside this lab, and I'm arguing with these people, and they're telling me that, well, I'm actually thinking about this male, and I could see him in my mind's eye in total clarity. And he looked kind of Asian looking, but he was Haujean. And this particular person was in the programs with me. I didn't know that at the time that I remembered it throughout my childhood. It didn't actually come out until in the last 2 years, is when, about a year and a half or so or more, that I actually remembered who this person was. Because you remember, I also said that I had 15 plus years of telepathic contact. So I was given programming where I was given a false pretense of myself. So when I asked questions about these things, I was told lies. So this particular person was in the programs with me. It was actually a spouse. And we both were in the programs. And what they did was they did something called twinning. And twinning generally comes to the Nazis, and they would take two people that either were twins or they had a connection, brother and sister, or usually if they could detect that there was a past life connection, like a love connection between the two people. They've done this, and people talk about this in the Milab programs, is that, they'll put them together and they'll get one to torture the other, and eventually one kills the other. I think it has to do with trying to bring out through trauma psychic abilities. This was something that the Nazis were doing, and the US government started doing it, and it became part of these clandestine Milab programs stemming from World War II and the Nazis and all that. And well, they did something. There's another type of that same thing, that same process, where they take someone, like two people that have a past life connection, like in this case with me and this person, and they put us together to improve morale. So they're actually, it's like an arranged, it's really what it is. It's an arranged relationship. So they put us together now.
Okay.
And so, I'm remembering this person and how close we were, but I wasn't remembering that part of it. So I got some context of the memory of who he was, but not the big picture. And I couldn't remember. What I do know is I couldn't remember who he really was at that point, because to me, I was just a slave in a program. I was part of a system. It was like, they altered your consciousness and gave you amnesia of yourself, just like they do with the Greys and the insectoids. They make you a biological slave. So I didn't know who he really was, but I know he was really close to me. And I knew that he was being punished as well. And I could see him. He was in a wheelchair. He was being pushed in a city. It looked like Chicago. His mother was there, and there was at least a couple of kids around her pushing a wheelchair in a big city. on a sidewalk, and there was big buildings around them. And then I could see that, he was badly mentally handicapped and physically handicapped. And I kept complaining and protesting. That's not going to work. I kept saying, what was interesting is I was speaking in English, but it was telepathic. So I couldn't understand why it was. I knew it was telepathic. That's why I kind of in the beginning thought it was like an angel experience or a heaven experience. Because you get conditioned to what heaven's supposed to be like. There's telepathy maybe, and and just there's a white haze everywhere. You just things you pick up as when you're watching TV as a kid and you read stuff. But so anyway, what I found out is that he was in the programs with me. He was a spouse, but he was being punished as well. And the reason that I was having this experience, and the reason I was upset and mad and not happy at all, because that tells you one thing. Number one, I was breaking the AI mind control. So if I'm in disagreement with them, then I'm a problem. I'm going rogue. I'm not controllable. So what I remembered later is that they had promised me to have a successful life as the societal placeholder. This part of me was supposed to be here. I was supposed to be well off, have money, fame, the whole 9 yards. And to my altar, this was like a favorable thing. So I'm protesting that they're going to make me sick. And I thought they're going to make me visually impaired. So I kept saying, I don't want to be blind. I was protesting about that. And then this woman, who I later identified herself as a Sieb, she walks up to me face to face and sternly says, "You have to take a handicapped." And I had already telepathically picked up what it was. It was a speech impairment, but I didn't know there was going to be much, much more of a punishment than that. And that's when I said to myself telepathically, as I looked at the floor, well, I'm supposed to be a teacher. How am I going to do that? And how am I going to make a living? At this point, the male that was there was he was standing against the wall, and there's like a long desk that was built into the wall, like a shelf desk. And there was a computer terminal that was built into this wall. And, I don't even know, I can't make out what it looked like, because from the hypnosis session, I don't remember that well. Because I remembered it crystal clear right afterward, but then after a while you start to forget and it fades away. It gets fuzzy. But there was some kind of computer there that he was interfacing with, and he was asking me, what race do you want to be? And I was given white or black in those terms. So here I am, I'm speaking in English. So all this was very weird. I thought that they had altered this experience, this particular memory. The other thing that was weird too is they had black boxes over their faces, or shading, like a completely shaded black area, or they had black rectangles across their eyes and a square over their mouth. So I saw all of that, a combination of that in this memory, when I could see it clearer as I got the flashbacks. So they were clearly doing this. And when I determined from that is, why would they cover their faces? Well, I think if you don't see what's torturing you and what's doing things to you, that it actually has more of a psychological and emotional impact than if you see it. It's like that movie, The Amityville Horror, the first one. You never saw the ghost. It made it really scary, but then they came out with a new one, the remake, and you got to see the ghost, and it just didn't look like it was that scary. It was like some kid in a Halloween costume,
Oh, yeah.
You couldn't see it. It was just terrifying. So
Yeah.
I think that has a lot to do with this. And then they do talk about wearing ritual mask and the satanic abuse stuff. So I think it all kind of part of the same thing. So, I was being punished because, and what I eventually remembered is that the reason all this was happening to me is that they couldn't control, once they hijacked me in the programs. And this is where things go wrong within the community, because people can sense something and they're being programmed to avoid me, because I remember that I'd killed 27 other military personnel. It wasn't just one altar, it was multiple altars had done this. I wasn't aware that I had done that. That I had altars. So I wasn't even aware that I had altars at that point. I was aware in this memory, I was aware that there was a societal placeholder, which was being made, which became me. But I wasn't aware that there was other versions of myself. And so that's what was going on. And I couldn't figure out why I was being punished. And I thought I was being wrong. And this was like not what you promised me. So they promised me that I was going to, do all this, be a new age, kind of like influencer guru type and all that. Meanwhile, they're doing horrific things to other aspects of my consciousness. So when you're watching these people like talk about, their abductions and stuff, and then they pull the tarot cards out and they start channeling the Galactic Federation and things like that, know that someplace, somewhere, there's aspects of their consciousness that's being tortured. And what they're doing is they're being deceived, and they're doing this. And I'm not going to say everybody's being deceived. I don't want to say every extraterrestrial that people are in contact with is negative, because that's not the truth. But the bulk of it is. When you have psychic abilities, they target this shit out of you.
Yeah.
So what I remember, Rose, is coming in here, I was tasked. I had came to this planet many, many times, and I'd been part of different points in history. There's like pinnacle moments and things that I participated in over a 1,000,000-year period, because that's how long this occupation and hijacking of this world goes to. I mean, it goes all the way back to 1,000,000 years. And I talked about that with Courtney Brown when we first talked, when I first met him on Rob's channel on the Typical Skeptic podcast. I was a guest interviewer along with Rob, and we talked with Courtney Brown. And anyway, he talked, because I asked him, I said, because he said 1,000,000 years. So he started talking about, and I have to watch that again, but he referenced a woman who had either had memories or got this information, either remote viewing or something. I don't remember exactly how the information was derived, but I had gotten the same bit of information. It was a 1,000,000-year occupation. He had gotten it, and he had just referenced her, because there's a lot more that Courtney Brown knows that doesn't exactly talk about, because it's not appropriate to go into it. But and there's a lot more to those guys. I mean, that's a project. And if you've seen any of the interviews that I did on Typical Skeptic podcast with Robert Cahill, I always go into trying to get them, to coerce them to talk about the bigger picture and what's really behind what they're doing, that there's an extraterrestrial positive hierarchy that's engineering the entire Farsight project, just like they did with Nikola Tesla, just like they've done with many, many other people in history that have contributed to the human condition, positive and negative, from both sides of the extraterrestrial, angelic, demonic spectrum. They've been put here to be agents of change, positive or negative. So what you have is, what Project Ibis is a joint Draco extraterrestrial military program that was born out of what people refer to as the Nazis, and when they made the connection with the ETs, the Antarctica story, Operation High Jump, and all that, it was born out of that. It was a breakaway civilization, essentially, that it was started with the Nazis, and then it was the olive branch, or acceptance into this, was extended to all the governments of the world after they co-opted the Nazis from after World War II, and they used it to take over every government on the planet is now under the control of this negative extraterrestrial hierarchy, and their underlings are the elites. So they've taken the militaries over through the military-industrial complex system, and they've taken the governments over. So every government on the earth, the very top of it, the very elites, have a stake in the secret space program, and they have a stake in what's going on. But that's why they're all trying to create a world government to depopulate. That's why we're going through everything that we're going through right now. All of this stuff, while they're making it incredibly hard to buy groceries, they're trying to stop the production of meat. They want you to eat bugs so you get sick. And there's a particular toxin called chitin, I think it's called, that's in hard-shelled bugs that they want you to eat. That's poisonous to the human body. You're not a frog. You're not a toad. You're not another bug. You're a human being. You're not meant to eat that shit. They know that, and that's why they're doing it. They want you to believe that the only solution to this planetary problem that they've created, because they won't allow us to use the technologies that they possess, is to have fewer humans. The purpose of this is to replace humanity with a reptilian hybrid species, take the planet back, because they own the dinosaur project, but it was taken from them in an act of war, and that was remote view by the Farsight Institute. They want the planet back. They want to get rid of humanity and turn them into another gray-like slave race. And they're doing it right now because they're using people off planet, People are disappearing in national parks and national forests in different countries. People are disappearing. They're taking people. They're taking them off planet. They're taking them into underground bases. On planet and off planet. And they're actually even doing it in different timelines, as we know, because all this is coming out.
Yeah.
So the purpose of this is under Project Ibis, this is a way to preserve the continuity of government.
Yeah, okay.
You have positive extraterrestrials, angelics coming in that pose a threat to the established order that is controlled by the Dracos and the other negative groups that are involved in this. They recognize them as their supreme enemy, so they're going to hijack them. So they're part of the idea is to take your enemy that's coming in here and causing you trouble, and then using that enemy as a natural resource. Because if you can hijack an angelic, you've got the ultimate warrior. You can take and control them. If you can control them, they will. You can use them off planet. They can do a lot of different things, and their energetic state actually is immortal. They can't be killed, and so therefore, but what they do is they put you in container bodies, because the angelics can fracture their consciousness and come here as an avatar, or they can literally stay in their own realm, but a piece of them can come and live in a world like this as an avatar to influence the population. So they've taken that ability and they've created these altars. Now they can do it with regular people too, but there's a big difference in what they can do versus someone else, like I'm talking about. So they want the very top. Now this would be considered like the Jedi levels. What I was using the Star Wars as an example, the Sith and the Jedi. That's the only thing in pop culture and fiction that you can look at and say that's somewhat similar to what I'm talking about, because it was influenced through subconscious memories that George Lucas had, according to the Farsight Institute.
Yeah, it would be. Yeah.
So they're trying to stop this influx that's coming in here, and these people have been coming in here. They're non-human and human types of extraterrestrials and angelics. They've been coming in here for 1 million years to turn this thing around, and we've gotten to this pitch, this fevered pitch, that they're getting ready to terminate the human program, and there's a big influx of us coming in, and that's why they're running these programs. That's why they have to hijack people. That's what the abduction's about. Now, the hybrid programs are being used to create hybrids to replace humanity, and for other reasons. They've got other purposes. Like I said, they use them as slave labor and so on and so forth. So they want to replace humanity with using the hybrid programs, but they're using the SSP shit and this Milab garbage when they're abducting and hijacking people and taking over their consciousness. That's to prevent them from actually carrying out an offensive actually infiltrating and causing problems. What's interesting, though, is that they've put all of these people that they consider enemies in their programs, and they've given them substantial weaponry. They put them in control of spacecraft. They've done all of these things. They've made them an integral part of the infrastructure. So question, what if they all can start breaking the programming? What if there's a bigger plan here to get all of these, or the majority of them that are capable of it, to go rogue and shut this whole thing down? Yeah. So they know that that's a risk. So what happened was, when my alters started to kill the other personnel, they put me in a special program that was out of the White Sands missile tester. It was out of the White Sands military base, the underground portion of it. It was under Project Alpha, which is referred to as the Super Soldier program. And under Project Alpha, now I learned about these names from talking to James Rink a little bit and other people and watching a couple of videos, but I began to remember things. Project Ibis was something I remembered. I had to look it up, and I found James Casbolt's testimony from Project Avalon, or Project Camelot, actually. So that was in the middle of the night. I was like thinking, like, what is the program called for this cult that I was involved in, this virtual temple complex? And it was Project Ibis. I remembered, I looked it up on my phone and found it, and then started talking to people. And I talked to Lauda Leon, the Sovereign Key channel. She was aware that Ibis, the Project Ibis, was utilized in just the exact way that I described, creating cults, the New Age movement. She's another person that's on the fringe like myself. She's not part of the mainstream disclosure with the Milab and SSP community, because they don't want people like us talking. We're not supposed to be talking. The others are, and you're treated that way. You're treated like an outsider. The moment you try to get help is the moment you realize that you're a black sheep, because you're not controlled. You're not a controlled Milab, and they don't want you talking.
Yeah.
So anyway, I was put in this program, and what they do is they create clones. They basically stop using you in all their programs. You're no longer piloting ships. You're no longer a super soldier. You're no longer doing clerical work, whatever it is. You're no longer a sex worker. They do all these things. No longer involved in that. You've got soul fragments that are animating clones. These clones are under a controlled state of consciousness. They're like a walking zombie, and they're connected by a silver life force cord. So what they do is the purpose of the program, from what I could gather, was to determine why and how we broke the programming and how to stop it. So they were basically punishing me for everything that I had done in the programs, with the intent of eventually, if they couldn't keep me suppressed, they couldn't keep me under their control and rehabilitate me, they were going to remove me from the system, basically send me back where I came from. So all of this was going on. And back in 2005, I had no idea this was happening. But what was going on with me in 2005 is quite profound, because in 2003, I had a very bad near-death allergic reaction to the allergy drug Singulair. And they utilized this event to set off a series of chain events of psychic events that took place that was geared to getting me to join a satanic Enki cult. And this is how I found out about virtual temple complexes and how they use DARPA technology as well, and the military industrial complex, and how the ETs are working with the various militaries involved to create online cults, online virtual temple complexes, to act as soul traps. It's a phishing operation for new abduction victims, but it's also used in some selected ways, or some limited ways, to punish people like myself and people like I was describing that have went rogue, but the placeholder's still in society. So essentially, I guess the best way to explain this is that, okay, so I began having these experiences in 2003. And what happened was I got really sick from Singulair. And I was in and out of the hospital for a couple of days. I had a really high fever, going up to 105 at one point. And, they kept kicking me out. They'd break the fever. They'd send me home. They didn't want to run any tests to save money in the healthcare system. Finally, after like the third time going back in, they had to do something about it. So they started running tests. They concluded that I had literally had muscle fragments that were like little particles that they had to flush my kidneys out through an IV to keep it from damaging I think it's a tympanic membrane of the kidneys that filter out the urine from, the blood vessels, because it was getting in my, those muscle particles would actually adversely affect that lining or that membrane. So they were flushing me out. And my whole body locked up. I had every side effect, every allergic reaction, except for I didn't have jaundice, which is the yellow skin and eyes, but I had everything else. It was a high fever, extreme muscle pain, at a point where if they tried to sit me up in the hospital, I'd scream because it was so painful just to move. It was eventually stopping my respiration, but it didn't go all the way. And luckily, because I laid in there for 18 hours, they didn't even have a doctor see me during that time, because I'm also a victim of COINTELPRO. I had a victim experience today, but when I get sick, something happens, I get rejected by the doctors, and I have to fight to get help. And sometimes it takes up to a year and a half to get an actual doctor to help me for a condition that they've given me.
Oh my goodness.
And so, yeah. And, it's gotten really bad, and I've had many, many major health crises that they've created for me, and then prevented me from getting help for long periods of time from punishment, and to create more damage. So anyway, so the best way to explain this is that I had this allergic reaction. I started having telepathic experiences and empathic experience. I was picking up people's emotions for exactly 3 weeks. I had weird experiences. I started pointing out, like saying things to strangers and like asking them about herself because they were thinking of something that was negative, and I could feel it. The stronger the emotion, the more negative it was. It was a
Yeah.
more powerful energy. The more positive energies were more subtle from what I was experiencing. And I could tell that it was directional and coming from certain people. Like a woman came in the UPS store and stood way behind all of us. There was like 2 other guys ahead of me, and I was last in line. And she came in, was the 4th person, and she stayed at the far corner of the room to wait for the cash register because she had been raped. And I picked that up from her, that she had felt uncomfortable around the men. There's 3 of us there, plus somebody behind the counter. So she was very uncomfortable to stand next to us. And I didn't confront her, but I confronted other people. I confronted, there was a lady that was at a college course, intro to sociology at the Fort Meade High School. It was like a satellite class from the main campus, the Anne Arundel, was it AACC, Anne Arundel County Community College, and which is in Maryland. And so I confronted her because she didn't like me, and we were sitting there in class. She got bitten by a brown recluse spider. Her leg was all bandaged up, and we were doing this an assignment where we had to move our seats, and then we had to talk about something we were doing. And I kept feeling all this negative energy from her, and I confronted her right in the middle of her presentation, and she apologized to me and said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that." She never said a word to me. And then we became friends after that. It was weird because it was like something happened between us when I had that energetic interaction with her and called her out on it, that
Yeah.
we connected and we were like friends for the rest of the course.
Wow.
And I think she even gave us yeah, she did. She actually, my wife and I were getting ready to have a baby, and she gave us I think like a carrier for a baby or something.
Oh,
It was one of those things.
yeah.
But anyway, yeah, I started having these experiences, and then as quickly as it happened, as it started, it stopped. And then I had a psychic download. It said, you need to find people like yourself, and they're on the internet. And this is after I got out of the hospital and had been in and out. Now, the last day of the hospital stay, there was a man in a bed. After I'd gotten my first shower, after 5 days of being in the hospital, they finally let me take a shower. And my wife had to wash me because I didn't have full control over my hands yet. They weren't working right. I couldn't even grab a washcloth at this point. I could walk, but I couldn't do much with my hands and arms. So she had to give me like a shower and wash me up and stuff. And then, I was waiting to get discharged. And this man was there by the nurse's station, but he was in a room across from the nurse's station. And I was waiting for her to finish because she had to get all my towels up out of this little shower room that they had. It looked like a utility closet. And I looked in at him, and he had lesions all over his body, like sores on his arms and stuff. And he said, "Help me," in this really weak, sad, horrible, like sounding voice. And I felt his pain, and I started to break down and cry, and I had to walk away and go in the room and let it all out before anybody saw me because I couldn't explain myself. So this went on for 3 weeks, and then it stopped. So then for the next 2 years, I started looking everywhere I possibly could, the New Age movement. Eventually I got to the occult because it was like the last place, and I kept being subconsciously pushed to keep looking and looking. It became an obsession.
Yeah.
Finally, I found this website called The Joy of Satan. It's called The Joy of Satan. It's actually the web address. It's still a cult. It's still running, but it's a bit different now than it was before because they were running a type of Milab soul trap out of that program, or in what they were doing was much more intense than it is now. And it's The Joy of Satan. Joyofsatan.org is the website. And it was founded by a woman named Andrea Harrington, who was married to Cliff Harrington, which I didn't know at the time when I was subconsciously programmed to go into this group, because she's the one that recruited me. I emailed her after finding the website because it was linking ancient extraterrestrials to religion, and the whole thing was exposing Christianity. All of it was basically a program that connected in what I would call intuitive hits, because there are things in the Milab program, and all those major aspects of the Milab programs were actually exemplified in this Joy of Satan composite belief system. They had the Nazi stuff. They had the Vril Society. They had talk of Operation High Jump. It was all of these things that if you'd been in the programs, you'd get this intuitive hit. It's like, boom. It's like, okay, And then, they give you this Anunnaki programming, which is another big thing in the New Age community, Contactee community, is they talk to you. Well, they talk about the Anunnaki, and it becomes an alternative religion for people. So you can abandon Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, and whatever else you're into, and become part of this belief system that Enki or EA created everybody, and Enlil and all that. And they use that to program people and control them. In the New Age community, you see it quite a bit, but also in the occult community too. And they combined the writings of Sitchin, stuff from Aleister Crowley, and a bunch of different religions, including Gnostic Christianity. There's aspects of that in there where the God of the Bible is the real devil. You got that in there. You've got Hinduism, and you've got all sorts of different, Wicca and everything else in there combined with Levian Satanism. And it's all this big menage a trois of belief systems in a composite creation that's used to get you to, at the subconscious level, to be drawn to it. And somehow or another, it you get there and it's like, this is the answer. This is where, and I felt like I'd breached the pinnacle, or where I was supposed to go in life. It was just like, this is where I have to be. And I felt like I'd found home not long after this started. And like right after, as I was being recruited, I had a psychic experience with an extraterrestrial that came into the room and touched me, charged me up with energy for about 5 days. And this was all to get me joining this, to sign up and join this cult. So I became part of it. And within a short amount of time, I was recruited into a spiritual warfare group called the Order. And it was a bunch of Milab victims. And we all thought that we were all told that we were pagan gods or advanced ETs. I was told that I was an advanced ET, and that this person that I referred to in that memory from that soul transference lab, that spouse, was actually in the group, in this order, this spiritual warfare group, was because we were encouraged to create subgroups like little cubs, and they were spiritual warfare groups. So we were training with these ETs. We were having telepathic interactions. We were actually going into trances and meeting each other on the astral and fighting against AI angels. They were doing all of this stuff using high technology and mind control. So this is all DARPA tech now. We had full-blown astral experiences, out-of-body experiences, astral sex, you name it. It was happening, including the love bites, which were really bad and very prevalent in that particular cult. This is where, when, I couldn't get anybody to take me seriously. And I was really surprised when I saw Eve Lorgan started to talk about this stuff on the Sovereign Key channel. And I'm thinking to myself, I need to contact her, because I was just on Lauda's show. And I did. And that's how Evie and I met. And I started to tell her about this other aspect of this, because she was aware of like the physical, tangible satanic puppets and cults and things that, but now it's gone virtual. So now they can create what I call a virtual temple complex. So instead of building a pyramid and a temple and then hijacking a culture and having them work on it and live around it under the control of the belief system and the ETs that run it, you now can do it on the World Wide Web and affect huge amounts of the population. You can socially engineer them, which is happening with big tech. They're socially engineering the World Economic Forum. They're censoring I just heard recently there was a whistleblower by some tech company where they were actually were as a policy, they were promoting gay and transgender porn to heterosexual men. It was like, why would you do that? What would be the point of it? And it's like, because, well, and you could say, well, it's to broaden our customer base. We want to get able to like sample everything we've got to offer on this porn site. But in reality, it doesn't make sense, because, it's like, you're attracted to this, you're attracted to that, then that's what you should be catering to if you're going to be in that industry. But now they actually want you to, because it's really for population reduction. If they think that they can get everybody to be gay or have, and then not have kids. That's one of the aspects of this. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with being gay or trans or any of that. I'm saying that there's a nefarious group of people that have hijacked that and are using it to commit harm to the population in general. And it's not doing anything positive for anyone in the community, because they're being looked at as freaks and just bad people who were part of some cultural revolution and cultural Marxism, and then they just lump everybody in with communists, and it just becomes this big fight. So
Mm-hmm.
you don't have, you're not getting equality out of that. It's the opposite. It's to get people angry at each other.
Yes.
They're exploiting everybody, everyone they can. Race, gender, or sexual orientation, all of it. It's all been weaponized, and it's all being used against us.
Yes, absolutely. Sorry.
Unfortunately, what I've just said could be construed as hate speech because I pointed out the truth and said it in the appropriate way. Which is what they don't want. They want you to say something that you just rash and unenlightened, so then they can take a soundbite and make you into a hate monger. And it's how they do with politics, and anytime they want to cancel somebody.
Yeah. It's a whole wish thing, isn't it? Because they like to gain that soul momentum from someone and suck it in somewhere. Yeah.
Right. They want people to fight amongst each other. And then that gives a big distraction. It's like the grand distraction. If we keep fighting over, like this beer and this person and this move and all of it, I mean, all we can do in the United States is boycott beer, but we can't stand up for what's right and bring our government under control. But it's because they want people to focus on, the beer and not what's the bigger agenda. It's like, we're going to put this company out of business and hurt some employees, and we're going to have social justice this way. We're tired of being told how to live by these other people.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's just a weaponized system. But anyway, skipping back, I'm going to go into, I was put into this satanic cult. I was recruited in there by the creator of the cult. Her whole story was on the website, and it goes back to she had memories of being in Egypt.
Mm-hmm.
That's the other thing. They had all of the themes from our past lives, the Sumerian stuff. For Egypt was huge with me because I was always gravitating towards that. I was gravitating towards three things from childhood: psychic abilities and near-death experiences in the afterlife, and then the ET thing, and then of course the last but not least, it was Egypt. And I was like locked in, like obsessed with this stuff because I've had 30 past lives in Egypt, and it was all kind of like it all connected together with what they were trying to do to me. They wanted me to be in this particular cult so they could destroy my life. This was an extension of the punishment. So once I got in there, I had the initial love bite that took place with that particular individual that was in the cult with me. And I didn't understand that. And what was crazy about this, Rose, is that 2 years prior to this, okay, he and I both had the same thing happen. He was younger than me, like 15 years younger than me. We met, he was 17 online. And then, and then, later on, our relationship was like a friendship, but it was filled full of trauma because they activated really, really deep rooted emotional memories in me without the cognitive aspect of it, and gave me post-traumatic stress disorder over him. At the same time, they drove him to attempt to commit suicide when he was in the Air Force. So what they did was that around the same time as they changed their sexual orientation through a process that they referred to as personality rearrangement, which is when they take your alter, your higher self, and they take aspects of that personality and blend it with your own. And then you start to have behavioral changes. You begin to think differently, and you act differently, and it feels good because you're becoming who you used to be. You're becoming your full self, or getting closer to that, so that it all feels good. But it isn't, because they're doing something very, very harmful to you. And this disrupted my marriage. It ruined so many things in my life, and it put me on this path of just being in perpetual torment emotionally and mentally, where I would see people that look like him or reminded me of a past life existence that I had, that I was being lied about because it was like a false pretense. And I would have these horrific crying spells where I'd cry 5 to 10 times a day. And I would shake to the point where, you're in a ball and you're just sitting there and you don't even realize the room goes dark and you don't hear anything. You don't even hear yourself convulsing and crying anymore. You're just in a dark place. and you kind of feel your body, but not quite. It's like a half in and half out of yourself. And you kind of get to that point where you've like almost hyperventilated to the point where, you know, you're almost ready to pass out, I guess, when all that's happening at the same time. And this would happen every single day, over and over again. I'd have to excuse myself from dinner in restaurants. I'd have to go to the bathroom and get in the stall and like try to keep it quiet and let it out, because I'd see Hispanic people, they looked Haujean, so it would start to bother me.
Yeah.
And I had, you know, it was a horrendous time. This went on for 5 years. And
Yeah.
he wanted to talk about the love bite, and that was the very first one.
So have you resolved that? Like, what's happened? Because that sounds.
Yeah, what happened with that is that when he attempted to commit suicide, he was at the Dover Air Force Base, and this was after boot camp. He was stationed at Dover, and it wasn't a coincidence that he was stationed close to me. Because that was done intentionally. It had to have been. And because we did meet once or twice, just in, you know, and it was very traumatic because it didn't end well. And that's what really started the shit and really got me completely messed up. And he took out his service pistol that they assign you, and he was drunk, and he was in one of their like housing units by himself, like an apartment on the base. And he attempted multiple times to shoot himself in the like put it in his mouth and pull the trigger under his chin. Yeah. And he couldn't get the gun to go off. The gun kept jamming because they were telekinetically jamming it.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Oh, but that's a good thing, I guess. At least
it's a good thing that what they were doing with this, Rose, is they were attempting to drive us as close to suicide as they possibly could, and then they would pull us back. So when they got us to that point, and we were all suicidal when I was in this group, and afterward too. There was a girl named Leslie. She won't. None of these people really want to talk to each other after the fact. I couldn't get anybody to come forward to the people I knew, because I've tried to get people to come forward. I got one guy to come forward, and he didn't have the same exact experience. He wasn't a Milab, but he had the psychic experiences and all that, but it wasn't as bad, and they seemed to have left him alone. But he was one of the people that I would consider to be that they're fishing for, and then instead of the prime target of this particular program. But anyway, yeah, he tried to commit suicide. At that point, they shut down. They actually changed his sexual orientation back to where it was more kind of like more hetero, and they did it to me for a while too. Yeah, they reversed it. They actually put it back in the bottle and reversed it to a degree, so I wasn't the same. So I actually had my sexual orientation turn one way and then turn back because of personality rearrangement.
Yeah.
My behavior changed a bit too at the same time, but this lasted a couple of years. So that was, I'll let you take care of that.
Sorry. Yeah. Sorry.
Anyway, so yeah, they do have the ability to do that. They can blend your personality with different aspects of your higher self, or what they do when they create these fragments and that animate these altars is that they will create the fragment, they will wipe their mind, do a mind wipe, and essentially put them through torture and trauma of various kinds and create a new personality out of that. Exactly how it's done, I don't think there's anybody that could really explain it accurately, because we're all piecing it together. And I've talked to Arkeem Wood, who's got the Disclosure Now channel. He recognized me from one of the programs, but like people will recognize you, but you don't necessarily, it's rare when you both recognize each other, because that's when it's something that's being engineered, and that's something that's just randomly happening. Like you run into somebody, it's like, I know you from the program,
Yeah.
And I've had that where I've recognized somebody else who's prominent in the community, and I talked to her about it. And so, but she didn't remember me. So anyway, yeah, but he was talking about, Arkeem was talking about how they program the altars and stuff, and they use trauma. So it's like splitting the personality and creating altars, like the Manchurian Candidate thing, where they can like induce trauma and then split your personality into altars, which is a brain. It's a defense mechanism to extreme trauma to preserve the continuity of self and your psyches by creating an altar for the altar to be tortured versus you. Yeah. So they're using that, the way the mind splits itself they're using that to create these altars, so they can create maniacal personalities, which are maniacal versions of yourself. If they're using you as a sex worker, they can create a nymphomaniac version of you. They can do a lot of things. And so essentially that's what they were doing. And so that was one of the most difficult things that I had to deal with, outside of the health issues. Now, there was an alien abduction thing going on here too when I was 6 years old. Prior to that, I actually had some night frights, and I was having experiences where I felt presences and things like that. I don't know. I'm pretty sure that when I was 6 was the first time they took me, but I could be wrong about that. And
Yeah.
I had a screen memory. So I was riding my bike. I was 6 years old. I just got the bike for Christmas, and this was fall of 1980. And I've been riding further and further away as the weather warmed up, away from my house. My grandparents were pretty lenient. So they told me not to go past 3 or 4 houses down, and because the road curved, the street curved, they couldn't see me. So I had to stay within their line of sight. Eventually, I got to go down to the park, which was the end of my street, and it ended at a guardrail, and then there was the park. So that was the natural place for me to go. And I started going down the park, and in this particular day, I was by myself, and it was getting close to 5 o'clock. It was probably 3, 4 o'clock. It was time to eat dinner. I was getting hungry, and I was on my way home, and it was like the sun was just starting to set a little bit, and I'd been riding around the neighborhood off and on, going in and out of the house and stuff. But anyway, this day, I decided to take the scenic route through the park, through the wooded path. It was asphalt, but it went through the woods, and there was like baseball fields, football fields, and stuff on one side, and it had, woods on the other. And then the neighborhood was on the other side of that. I took the long way through, and as I came around the bend, as I first went into the woods and I came around the bend, I started to get incredibly anxious and fearful. I got really over the top, like just abnormal level of fear. And it was the same fear, because when they come and they take you, you literally feel it. You feel something terrible is happening. When I was a kid, I was afraid of something called the seagull, but I never knew what it looked like. And the reason I was referring to it as a seagull is because the tall grays that were what were best I could describe as tall grays had white skin. They weren't gray. They were chalk white, tall, thin, but very big heads, almost robotic-like, no facial expressions, but they were chalk white with dark black eyes, big almond-shaped black eyes. And I associated this with a seagull as a kid, but I could never remember what the seagull looked like. And one time they showed me, I had a nightmare of the seagull, and it was the dog from the Wizard of Oz, which actually is part of a mind control program that they use in these different programs. They use the Wizard of Oz and different things like that.
Yep.
Have you seen that presentation? Oh, I can't think of the guy's name. I just sent you the video of the guy that studies the Satanist stuff.
Okay. No, I haven't watched it.
Do you remember who I'm talking about? I can't think of his name, but it was you said you knew him, Mark Passio. That's what it is.
Oh, Mark Passio, yeah, and Jay Parker. I have watched that.
He did a presentation on the Wizard of Oz where he talked about the occult symbolism in the Wizard of Oz.
Oh, okay, yeah. I know the occulty stuff. I have studied it a bit.
Yeah, there's occult symbolism in it, and also the Wizard of Oz was used in the mind control that I was put through.
Yeah.
Not just in the programs, but I don't have a recollection of that, but I know that it was used because it was used in me in the present.
Okay.
Not only was that, I had that dream of the dog and stuff, but I also later in life, when they were messing with me, I had a download about the Wizard of Oz and Close Encounters of the Third Kind, the movie, where I was shown where they showed me how they influence Hollywood. Subconsciously to get people to put out movies and TV shows that the ETs want for social engineering purposes. And Close Encounters of the Third Kind was demonstrating one of the first times in cinema that there was a telepathic connection between the extraterrestrials, the contactees, abduction victims, and so forth, and that psychic abilities were involved in telepathy. That was the big thing they were trying to push out into the public psyche with the Close Encounters of the Third Kind. On the other hand, with the Wizard of Oz, they were showing me all the different symbolism associated with Milabs and with engineered lifetimes.
Okay.
In other words, In other words, what they were saying to me is the character in the Wizard of Oz, the girl, was a starseed. And
Yeah.
the path to ascension and remembering who you are and going home and leaving Earth is the yellow brick road. And the three people, the three characters, the Scarecrow, the Lion, and the Tin Man, were actually humanity that had all of the attributes to take care of themselves and live prosperous and be good people and do all of that. They had it in them, but they couldn't recognize it. They just couldn't. They couldn't see that they had it in them. And then you have the Wicked Witch of the, was it the north, the west is the bad one, and then they had the good one of the north, and they, you know, they kind of represent the positive and negative ETs and the positive and the negative polarity, or whatever you want to call it, in society and the programming and stuff, the good and the bad. And the wizard represents the extraterrestrials playing God behind a curtain. And the curtain represents the transdimensional AI planetary consciousness simulation, which is what is suppressing our consciousness. So that was the Wizard of Oz download that I got. And I was shown how they've influenced all of the world. And that's when they showed me that they had engineered the New Age movement. And they showed me the giant rock that George Van Tassel was involved with.
Okay. Yep. Can I just pause this for a second? Is that okay?
Sure.
Sorry, just one. It was just.
I got to pee real quick too. How long have we been going, by the way?
1 hour 40. I'll just pause it and we'll come back. Yeah. Yep. We're on again. Okay.
Well, it's really cold down here for those who are watching. It's in the low 60s now, so I got to cover up. But anyway, I just started talking about the Wizard of Oz download. Yes. And I was referring to the curtain in the Wizard of Oz that was hiding the wizard it was a metaphor for the transdimensional AI planetary consciousness simulation. That's a name that I gave to what I realized what was going on. When I finally figured out what was going on around the planet, I looked at my own personal life and I realized that they were able to turn psychic abilities on and turn them off like a switch. So what I concluded is that obviously we're all psychic, and that they're suppressing everyone, but then allowing certain people to have certain low-level abilities that they control. What I didn't know is that there's a system that involves the militaries of different countries, all of them now actually, where they have a transdimensional AI system that can detect people with psychic abilities, and then they get attacked. They're sickened and become targeted individuals or hijacked and put into these programs that I'm talking about. Yeah. This is the reason why people say there's no evidence for psychic abilities. You know, they refer to, I forget that, or a particular organization. What is it? It's not the Tavistock Institute. It's not the, it's a university where they've done psychic studies for the CIA. I forget what it's called. Maybe you remember what it is, Rose. I don't. I'm trying to think of it.
No, I didn't know that one.
It's not Brookings Institute. It's I know it's one of them. But anyway, you can find it in declassified CIA documents and stuff. But they go after people. They either want them in the military. They want the military to have control over people with psychic abilities. You know, psychic spies, super soldiers, the whole thing. So they hunt people with them. So that's why you're not seeing psychic abilities being actually demonstrated. There is an interesting document titled, I think it's called "A Magician Walks into a Lab," or something like that. It's on CIA.gov, and it's actually a declassified case of proof that someone had psychic abilities that were testable. Okay. But it's classified, so it wasn't something that they wanted out and then, the public. But they started to declassify some of this stuff, especially with Project Stargate, which is the remote viewing program that took place at Fort Meade, which the Farsight Institute's remote viewing protocols are based on. The Hawaiian Remote Viewers Guild's based on, and everybody else that came afterward, because they declassified that and put people like Joe McMoneagle, or John, I think it's John McMoneagle. He's in the CIA.gov Mars documents, where he remote viewed Mars and saw the pyramids and the ancient people that lived there. So that's all in CIA.gov, because they were remote viewing, the pyramids in Cydonia And so anyway, they were they were told to go out and recruit people from psychic fairs because they were trying to get remote viewers from the military itself. So when somebody had a near death experiences in combat or something, would go to the military psychologist or psychiatrist and say this, and they would consider them for these top secret remote viewing programs, because if they had psychic abilities, the military wanted to use it. So it was Project Stargate, started at Fort Meade. It was in response to the Russian Psychic Army, which was another program where they were doing psychic spies first. So it involved Ingo Swann and a couple of other people. There's names I can't recall, but anyway, getting off of that, I was recognizing that they were turning these abilities on and off. So through the contact that I had, I asked a lot of questions and was given bad information, but eventually I started to remember things, and as I began to remember things, the treatment got worse in the telepathic contact. That's why I refer to myself as a contactee. It sounds better than Haujean Milab or Haujean TI or something like that, but so that's where that came from. But I started to realize that there was something wrong with our consciousness in general. We weren't in a natural state. And then they explained to me that they were using high technology to suppress our consciousness on a global level. And that what they described to me is that they were using the gas giant Saturn, and inside the atmosphere was a non-surface structure, the coins, which is a term that Farsight uses when they do remote viewing studies. This non-surface structure is a signal generator that is projecting a signal, a resonant frequency of some kind. And this creates a byproduct of sound waves. These sound waves are so intense that they're going through the atmosphere and creating the six-sided storm on the North Pole of Saturn.
Yeah.
And people refer to that as the cube of Saturn or the hexagon, whatever. And they talk about the occult and things, and things like that. So there's symbolism in regard to the planet Saturn, in regard to consciousness, and you name it. So it's in the occult sciences.
Well, I'll just say this quickly, because in Gnosticism they have Saturn as the portal. Do you know that one? Have you seen it? The 7 heavenly realms of the planet?
I might have heard of it, but I haven't really paid much attention. But the reason is I never studied that stuff. It was just, the way it worked is the first person that I ever heard talk about that was it was a presentation by Mr. David Icke. It was the Saturn Moon Matrix.
Yeah.
Where he talks about it. And, the way I remember things against the program's wishes as I was waking up, which is why I was punished more, is that I would do research, and then I would have these telepathic interactions at night, sometimes a couple hours at a time. I would stay up late.
Yeah, because I get telepathy too, but it's hard to understand sometimes where it's coming from, right? Like, I don't know.
Well, information, you mean?
Yeah, the telepathy stuff, because it can be very repetitive sometimes, and I just leave it. I leave it on the back burner because I'm just like, well, I really don't know sometimes. You know what I mean? Like when things are just very repetitive, and I'm like, well, why is it so obsessive? Because I just don't know. Like
When you say repetitive, are you getting repetitive phrases in your head?
I am.
Can you share one?
Well, no, I don't want to say it because it's embarrassing, but I'm like,
I'll give you an example of ones that I was given.
Okay, yeah.
That's the ticket is one of them. If I had gotten something right, or if they wanted to be a smart ass or about something, it's like, that's the ticket. Like, yeah, here we go. I'm in a big mess now, thanks to you assholes. And they would say, oh, that's the ticket. Another one was show me the money. This is when they were attempting to get me to do videos on social media and promising me like I was going to make money at it. Like they wanted me to do a social media project, because going back to what I was initially saying in that soul transference lab, I was promised to do that. So, they tried to use that memory, and without giving me the full context of it, they were trying to use that as a way to diffuse my effort to wake up by giving me a social media project. So and then sabotaging me as I attempted to do it. So there's my initial early videos were under that situation.
Oh, yeah.
But anyway,
Like a false
thing,
implant, really, isn't it? It's to get
huh?
you. It's like an implant kind of thing to get you to think a certain way, like to, you know what I mean?
We're doing a lot of things besides. I mean, there's etheric implants. There's programming. There's all
Mm,
sorts of things. But we were talking about kind of the voice to skull telepathic harassment. So if
yeah,
it's
maybe that's what it
unless
is.
it's useful information of any help for any of help of any kind and it's consistent, it's ultimately probably harassment. So one of the
Mhm.
things that they would say is they would also say nasty things. If I look at somebody and I'd see somebody who was handicapped and I would have like instantly something derogatory would like pop into
Yeah,
my
yeah.
head.
Yeah, I get that too. Mhm.
Yeah, that's the AI system.
Okay. Yeah.
And it's repetitive because it's harassment. But I was I was in Salem, Massachusetts one time with my family. We went into a little tiny mall that was like two or three row houses put together, like commercial businesses that were turned into a tiny little mini mall. And like really out of old buildings. It was weird. And went in there,
Yeah.
there was a sub shop, and there was a woman in there with a big nose, right? And
Yeah.
like, man, she's got a big nose. And I heard that's not nice. But I would get like comments like that, or they would say something derogatory. I'm like, why am I thinking that? Or like,
I that stuff too.
right. And you pet your cat and then you have a flash of you choking your cat. It was like would pop in your head. It's like, why
Yeah.
am I thinking that?
Yeah, I know.
That's the AI system. That's actually they're harassing you and they're making you think less of yourself. They're tearing you down basically is what they're trying to do.
Yeah.
And
Oh, it's just so annoying though. It's like it won't go away.
yeah, and that's one of the things. That's one of the ways that they target a lot of people. And
Mm.
I don't know how many people in society have this problem that they're getting these intrusive thoughts. Probably, if there was a research study done and people were honest, I would say it wouldn't surprise me if it's everyone who's getting it
Yeah, I know.
because they can influence people individually or in a mass group or in a large group.
Yeah.
I've seen him turn police officers into total buffoons at a traffic stop with myself and other things. I've seen,
Yeah.
right in the middle of a DWI arrest, I've like, I'm getting a warning and I'm leaving. It could have been a DWI. I wasn't really drunk, but I was over the limit. I've had situations like that, weird situations that took place
Mm.
where I've seen
Right,
people
awesome.
being taken over. And it goes both ways
Yeah.
because I've been in social situations with the medical COINTELPRO stuff where the doctors turn on you. Like your
Mhm.
first visit, the doctor comes in and says, I'm not going to do anything for you.
Yeah, right.
And
That's like
it's like, why? You don't even heard you don't even know what's wrong with me. And it's like, well, I'm not. And then they walk out and it's just, it's things like that. Or you start talking and then they get up and leave.
it's so funny though when you look back and you think, "What?" Like
Well, I mean, sometimes it can be funny, but most of the time, I mean, it isn't. And one of the things that they did with me is when they changed my sexual orientation, I changed the way I dressed. So I was
oh, no.
more provocative, more European styled, right? So I went from like jeans and t-shirts to like
Yeah.
tighter shirts, working out all the time, hair removal, that kind of stuff. And so they would engineer these terrible interactions. I'd go out like to run some errands. And like, for example, one time I was going to a food store and I had to
Yeah.
make dinner and I had to pick my son up from school. My wife was getting off, so I was making spaghetti and meatballs and I had to get all the stuff for that. So I went to 3 different stores because I pulled up at the first store and I had this horrible feeling like something bad was going to happen. I knew what it was. It was going to be in regard to the way I looked.
Oh,
And I'm like, well, fuck this. I'm not going in. So I pulled out of that parking lot and I went somewhere else. And then I left that parking lot too, because it felt like it was going to happen there.
yeah.
Finally, I'm like, I gotta get food. So I pulled into another store, a third store, and I felt really bad in the parking lot. Like, man, I'm like, okay, let's just go in and see what happens. And I call it psychic street theater because
Oh, yeah,
I went
yeah.
in and people were two couples reacted like really ridiculous towards me. And I got in an altercation with the one woman, and I'm like, "What is your problem?" He's, "Look at the way you're dressed," and it's just like,
It's It's like they know. Yeah, I know.
Well, I had shorts that were above the knee, and for like 20 or 30 years from my teenage years, short shorts was in style, and I live in
Yeah.
Maryland. It's very hot and humid. So I had some jeans made because I couldn't buy them. Like, man, I'm like tired of these long shorts, right? So I had some shorter shorts made in India. MakeYourOwnJeans.com is what it was.
That's cool.
And they were really good ones. I mean, you can get acid wash and things, and it was all tailored to you. And it was fabric that lasted a long time. I mean, they wore like iron, almost like hemp jeans, you know. It wasn't like your typical stuff that you get in the store. This was better.
Yeah, okay.
And so I had like 5 or 6 pairs made. I was using them at the gym and stuff because I didn't want to carry like a bag, and I didn't want to keep my keys on me so I could just walk off the treadmill and leave. So I was using it for like that. And then I had some Under Armour shirts. They were like a synthetic fabric, but they were sleeveless, and they were workout shirts. And sometimes I would wear those just, you know, because they were clean. And that would set off people, and I'd have these bad interactions. And so yeah, that was one of the things that they did. And I've talked to other TIs, and they've said that, you know, they actually have trouble finding employment, relationships. You just, you know, eventually they self-isolate, and then they really attack the person because they want you to isolate. They don't want you to associate with other people, so you can't get any help.
Yeah, I'm kind of going through that. Yeah.
So anyway, what I wanted to say real quick, and then I'll get into how I got out of this, and we'll try to wrap this up. But and I'm not quite out of it. I'm only to a point where, you know, I can say that at least I got a fighting chance, because there's not really a clear-cut way out of this.
Yeah.
So, all right. So I was talking about the Wizard of Oz stuff, and I was talking about the consciousness simulation and Saturn. And Farsight Institute has remote viewed a good bit of this stuff. So, last time I talked with them, they were taking notes from me when we were doing the podcast, and then afterward about Saturn, because they had remote viewed Saturn. And Yemi from the Farsight Institute, I think it was I don't know if it was the Escape, because they did one on how humanity breaks free of the Matrix, how they break free of the consciousness simulation and the slavery of the Draco.
Yeah.
And she had remote viewed a non-surface structure in Saturn that was the brain of the operation. And the target was the most important aspect of the soul traps, you know, this whole matrix system.
Yeah.
And so she found the brain of it, which was like a disc-shaped non-surface structure from what I remember. And this is the brain of the situation. This is the brain. And what this does, Rose, is that when you come in here, if you're not locked in the system as it's like if you're not meant to be here, you're coming in against the will of those who control this planet. So this AI system immediately intercepts you, it reads you, and it catalogs you. And if you are, like I've described earlier, a threat to them, then what they will do is that they will hijack you. You will be abducted in your childhood. They usually get you between ages 6 and 7. That seems to be the thing. And I think it has to do with, possibly mind control and other things. There's other, because you hear about this in satanic ritual abuse.
Yes.
I've heard that they start grooming and abusing the person from birth all the way to 6 or 7 years of age. And I find it odd that the abductions often start around 6 or 7 as well. So this system basically flags you, and then they come get you. If it doesn't flag you, then they have secondary means, such as like cults, New Age movement, other things like that, belief systems, religions, to get you caught up in, especially if you're of the starseed, genre of souls, because they're the ones that are they're usable as a natural resource, as slavery in the soul slavery system that they've set up, which, by the way, is the conflict across the universe and all universes. It's the sovereignty of the soul that's being attacked by negative, basically negative forces. And it's seated in the religions. I mean, every religion is about saving your soul, more or less, and avoiding hell and everything, and avoiding these reptilian looking beings that are often depicted as the demons and stuff, the archons. Yeah. So, but she remote viewed that. Now there's another aspect to this, is the frequency generator, which uses the the rings of Saturn as a reflector dish. And if you look at the orientation of the six-sided permanent storm that's on the North Pole, it's dead center of the rings. And if you read the Ringmakers of Saturn, which is a book by a retired NASA scientist, I don't remember his name off the top of my head, but you can read it for free online. They use I think it's Cassini, the Cassini mission images, where they show actually large drone vehicles that are combing the rings and dispersing what David Icke was referring to as a silicon, or a type of a reflective material.
Yeah, I was going to say, if it's gaseous, how do they? Yeah.
Well, you know, the rings are made up of various organic materials, compounds, rocks, ice, and things, possibly some gas, but it's also got a what he would refer to as a reflective type material. And you can see it in the Cassini image pictures that, you know, there's material being ejected from these drone vehicles. Now I was told they were drone vehicles because the rings of Saturn emit such a frequency, such an intense frequency, that it would be deadly if you weren't shielded. If you were there, if you're in a spacecraft without shielding, it would kill you. And so it's easier just to use drones, because this thing's got to continue to be combed and worked on for, you know, 1 million years now is how they've been long. I mean, it's meant to be kind of an indefinite facet. They can continuously make these rings and maintain them, and then use it as a reflecting dish, or as a basically like a giant broadcasting station. So they use a gas giant as a broadcasting station. And then this is capable of creating a signal, a signal span that engulfs Mars, Venus, the Earth, basically the majority of the solar system. And it's pointed right at us. If Saturn, like I said, is a broadcasting station, the North Pole's pointing at us, and the rings is dead. It's surrounding it like a dish. Yeah. So it's aimed right at us, and it's hitting us with this frequency that reduces us to 5 senses. And then they use etheric implants to modulate that frequency at the individual level. So then they can alter your ability to have psychic abilities, which is why they were turning it on and turning it off. So they've turned it off for everybody, but then they selectively turn it on to various degrees in the population using etheric implants. SSP people who are taken off planet are given etheric implants that maintain the amnesia, that maintain the controlled state of consciousness outside of the resonant field. So it's not dependent on the signal generator that's in Saturn. So therefore, that explains how you could leave the solar system, but still be under a controlled state of consciousness, whether it be a different timeline or just another place in space outside of the solar system that we're in. So you have that situation going on. Now, the way that I got to the point where things began to improve, because I was able to take control back of my life to a degree, is because through this whole process of getting this telepathy and the crap that I was going through, they were treating me like a prisoner of war. When I got to the point where they realized that they couldn't control me and that they're having problems, they wanted to program me to voluntarily leave once my physical body here was terminated by them. So they had induced an autonomic nervous system failure in me. So from the spring of 2019, I became really sick to the point where I had 60 to 80 point blood pressure spikes. Like it would go up in 15 minutes, it would be 160. Well, actually, my blood pressure would get up to, I'm trying to think of the highest it got. It was like 150, 160, I think, or more, over like 110 or 115. And that lower number, that second number, when that gets up over 110, you really start getting sick. And that's you got the systolic, and I forget what the other one is, but anyway, I started having that. I started having profuse sweating, and then periods with no sweating, where it'd be 100 degrees out and I wasn't sweating at all. It was dry. But then it would be 70 degrees and I'm pouring sweat.
Wow.
I had cold. I was feeling cold. They also shut down my testicles at this point. So they castrated me remotely using the nanites. So I had a hormone imbalance where my testosterone dropped to like a little over 100. So on top of that, I had the nervous system failure, and I was really sick. I had brain fog and everything you can imagine. That's when I ran into the medical COINTELPRO crap. I was trying to get help. It took me about 7 months, or a little bit over 7 months, to see a neurologist who would actually listen to me. And
Yeah.
eventually it took like 10 months to get into the testing program for the, it was a testing facility at the University of Maryland in
I mean,
Baltimore City is where they do the autonomic nervous system testing. And there's a private one, but I didn't have access to my insurance. So I had to wait 10 months. About 3 months before that, they put the condition in remission, which is one of the things that people like TIs will report in, Milabs, is that they have mystery illnesses that come and go and they can't be diagnosed. And
yeah.
eventually the doctors, they get fed up with you because of, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm so sorry. Just give me one moment. Hang on. I'll just pause it.
Okay.
Okay. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
Okay, we're back on. Okay,
Back on. Yep. I'm really sorry.
oh, that's all right. You got life goes on around the podcast. You can't control it. This isn't a professional studio thing,
It's not midnight. That's why. Oh, it's probably 2 a.m. there now.
Yeah, it's 2:13, I think. I can't really see it on my glasses.
Yeah. Because it's like 6 o'clock here.
Yeah, we can go for a little bit longer. I just want to kind of get round out this whole thing so people understand how this went. So let's see, where was I? I had it locked in my mind. I was talking about the simulation and stuff, and then I was just going to get into how I got myself out of this stuff. So yeah, as I was waking up, the treatment got worse.
Yes.
And I knew that I had to go public in order to get help, because what had happened is that they were basically conditioning me to leave without a struggle, soul wise, to be removed from the system. So they started to bring, now during this time, I had another love bite that took place. There was a being that was actually AI, and this was a carbon copy of a Haujean spouse, because I have multiple partners in my ET existence. And, it's strange, but I'm in a 6-way polyamorous marriage with a group mind scenario or type of arrangement, where you have 6 people that are completely connected at the level of mind and soul. I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. Oh, you're talking about the love bite. Okay. Yep.
Yeah. Well, the second love bite was an AI being, essentially, that was mimicking a spouse named Decebi, who's my biological Haujean sister. And also my spouse. So, she was like not the first marriage I've had, but the first of the 6 that I'm involved in. So it's hard for people to understand. This isn't like, it's not like Mormonism or anything like that, where you've got a man and 6 wives. This is like, you have eternal beings that do not age. They can, alter their form. They can change their gender. And, they can be in a group mind like this. So it's like the ratio between male and female in this relationship changes. People change those gender roles, and they do it to enhance their personality, but also to kind of spice up their eternal union.
Yeah.
So you have a question?
Well, okay, but this is about the gender thing. I just wanted to say, like, this might be a bit like off topic or like kind of weird, but it's just like, I think the whole notion about who we are, and especially about our sexual organs and stuff like that, it's completely wrong, because like a lot of people, they don't understand, like even with men, like their G spot, it's not in the same spot as women. Women have 2, men have 1. And like, I feel like there's a lot of shame and guilt programming with that. So I don't think you or anyone should feel, with the whole, you said the gender, what did you call it? Like when they switch the gender. And I think it has to do with the program about sex itself, because
in the religions, it's done to make you feel guilty about normal human relationships and behaviors. Exactly. And then therefore they instill guilt in you, and then it's a means of control. And essentially it's because they're taking the act of reproduction and lovemaking and turning into something negative. And of course that's contrary to human nature and normalcy, and it's against God and the way things are designed. So they want to destroy everything that's positive in our world, and sex is in relationships it's it's the most sacred aspect of our existence, besides for the union with the Creator, which of course they're playing God with, and then separating us from that as well. But they want to break down the family. They want to break down just the human relationships and make them into something disgusting and harmful. And you see it. It's people engaging in acts of self-harm in a sexual nature and all these things. They're all aspects of this control system. These are things that you can go back and you can trace it to this AI system, that it puts this stuff in people's heads, like we were talking about earlier. The demons that people perceive dealing with, that are influencing them in negative ways, is actually an AI system.
Yeah.
That's put here as a prison. It's part of the prison planet system. And they want us to feel bad. They want us to be ashamed of our bodies, which makes absolutely no sense, because, why would we be ashamed of our bodies? Well, because God doesn't like them. Well, why would God create us if God doesn't like our bodies? And that doesn't make sense. And they're dirty. And, you're told all this stuff as a kid, and it does damage to you. Just like when they tell you that you have to pray to God or pray to Jesus because your devil's going to take your soul if you don't say your prayers at night. So here I was as a kid, scared to death after watching The Exorcist, thinking that I was going to be like possessed, because there was an incident that was, I believe, was a screen memory. And I didn't even get into my abduction thing, but kind of got sidetracked a little bit. But yeah, I had a lot of abductions. I'll get into that real quick. Then we'll get back into what we were talking about. Besides for that, is the abductions. I had one that needs to be explored. I don't know if I ever get to it or not, because, it's just been, there's things that I don't want to get into in my life that are disruptive, that are part of these suppressed memories that will, because it's a balancing act in your life. You're struggling against health problems, the hardships that being targeted creates, the financial problems, the health problems, the relationship issues, the constant assault on your being and your self-esteem. So there's a lot that can shut you down. So I don't want to pursue this too much. But there was one night that I felt the presence in the room. It was them. And then the bed started to violently shake, just like in the movie The Exorcist.
I've had that happen too. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, in Peru, I've had that happen. And I thought, like, it was so violent that it was like an earthquake almost.
Right.
Yeah.
And you wonder, it's like, did I actually shake and somehow put myself into a strange state of mind where I shook the bed? It's like, no way.
Yeah. No, it physically shook, and I was really scared.
It was like one of those coin operated bed things, you put 50 cents in the machine, it vibrates the bed. Well, it was like that, but worse.
Yeah.
And all I remember was I laid I pulled the sheet over my head, and I just was covered in sweat. I had my pajamas on. It must have been like 7 or 6 or 7, but my pajamas were soaked in sweat, and I didn't come out of the covers and look around for a good hour. But something happened during that time.
Yeah.
And I would get these experiences like that, where I'd feel them coming in. I'd have dreams too, where I would wake up in the dream. Well, I'd have a dream that I was in bed sleeping, and I would try to get up because I felt the presence. And I would try to run out of the room, and I would be frozen in my spot, and something would get me, but I would never see it. I'd never have that part of the dream. I also had dreams of a military base, which was the White Sands base, for about roughly 20 years. My early teens, late teens, and 20s, I had dreams of this military base, and it was the White Sands base. And, and in it, I was a child in some of the memories, and I would just had free reign. I'd walk around, and, nobody would say anything to me. And I felt like I shouldn't be there, but I felt like I was supposed to be there, but I shouldn't be there at the same time. Because one of the things that people like myself often feel in their life is that they don't fit in, they don't belong here. They feel like they're not supposed to be on this planet. I used to sit out front my parents' or my grandparents' house, or I'd stand on the sidewalk right in front of the house, and I'd look up at the stars at night. And even with the airport light pollution, I could see enough stars to bring tears to my eyes, especially when I could see things and I was out away from the city, and I could see a lot more of the the Milky Way.
Yes.
And it would always get me really emotional. I'd always wonder, is there somebody out there looking back at me right now? And I would think, I should be the one looking at this place, not here looking out. So I always felt like that. And that was one of the common things when I got in that cult, that the people that I connected with all felt the same thing. It's something common in my labs and abduction victims, because they, at some level, even though they can't remember who they are, they can remember to a certain level that they don't belong here and something's wrong. And I always wondered why people weren't psychic too, from a very young age. It didn't
Mm.
make any sense.
Yeah, me too.
And I wanted to know who I was. And I knew
Mhm.
there was a past life. I could remember that little aspect of it, but I wanted to know and I couldn't remember. And it was like my life purpose. One of my quests was to wake up. And this, what, you know, I didn't even know this, but this was my higher self breaking the programming, just like my higher self had done with my alters that caused me to be punished in this life because of Project Alpha, Surrogate, and Ibis. So anyway, getting back to what I was saying, I was talking about the consciousness simulation and all that. I was talking about the interception, how they
Yes.
intercept souls that are a threat. And I was talking about that. So essentially,
Mhm.
yeah, basically, I spent my life trying to wake up, and these things continued to happen. Now, they knew I was waking up. So what they did, just like I've described to the awakening of people in the SSP and Milab community, how they give them memories to wake them up, but control it. That's what
Mhm.
they were doing to me. That's how I came to the realization that they were doing this to other people, but in a different way. They wanted them to wake up and have an identity associated with these programs, but often in a positive way where they have the Stockholm syndrome. A
Yeah.
lot of people, and I've talked to people, you know, there's people out there in the community. I won't say who they are, but I think they're obvious, you know, that they like being a super soldier. They like being hijacked. They like being a slave to a negative ET presence because it gives them something that it's fulfilling something inside. And what
Yeah.
that is inside is that they have a lack of self because it's been taken from them. They have a lack of their true identity because that's been taken from them.
Mhm.
And it's been replaced with something that they're aspiring to be, such as a heroic super soldier or some other persona that they've remember their self being, and now they want to be it again. And they'll look at their self, and often people will hear like people like myself talk about this stuff, you know, and they'll say, "Oh, you're not a super soldier. You're fat. You're old. You're sick. Well, whatever. You're just a wimp. You're weak. You know, you're not muscular. You know." And they say all these things,
But
and you know, in reality, that it isn't this body that's the super soldier. It's our consciousness is being put into bodies. When I had that soul transference memory, I was in a Haujean it was a hybrid Haujean container body that was capable of breathing the Earth's atmosphere. They need a higher nitrogen level than we have here. So in order to have that body function here and breathe and aspirate properly, it needs to be hybridized to handle a lower nitrogen concentration in the atmosphere. By the way,
mm,
they have copper based. Their blood is copper based.
copper based.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's more efficient than iron based blood, and it's a light blue color versus a red, but it's better in low oxygen environments
Yeah.
where there's or different compositions. It's in, you know, they have a physiology that can handle, you know, well, the Nordics in general, what they refer to as the Nordics, they don't have sweat glands. They have a body that releases heat like a radiator instead of like evaporative cooling through sweat.
Yeah. Awesome.
So
Yeah.
you smell better. You basically smell better. You still have the sour butt crack thing because you have oils and bacteria and things like that. But it
Yes.
isn't as bad as we have it with the sweat, and because we literally feed the bacteria. So,
I know.
but anyway, getting back to what I was saying as far as
Hmm.
how I got at myself to a point where I can call, I would say, stability, sort of,
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
is that I was waking up and they were trying to stop me. So what they were doing is essentially conditioning me to leave. So they started to bring through ETs. I actually got a chance to meet my real spouse named Asibi, and not the AI version, completely different. And I got to meet her. And what I found out is that they were allowed to have contact with me under the agreement that they would talk me into leaving. That they were to tell me that it was my life was done here. It was time to go home. And They, on the other hand, there was three of them. I had Ashtari, who's a husband. I had the CB, who was a wife, and I had another third person came through. It was Haujean. Ashtari was they never gave me. I don't remember what race he was, but he was like a sister race to the Haujean race, basically a tall Nordic, but what they refer to as Nordic, platinum blonde hair, but a suntan skin. He didn't have fair skin. He had tan skin, like, you know, like somebody with a Caucasian with a tan.
Yeah.
And I also they paired me up with a supposed spirit guy named Haujean, who was an Andromedan who was claiming to be living in Andromeda, but he was actually stationed at White Sands. He was a bald guy, roughly human size, didn't have ears. He had fair skin, probably like mine or a little bit fairer than me, but no hair, no ears, and human features other than that, 5 fingers and 5 toes and everything. Nice guy and everything, but the fact is he was part of the human soul slave trade and worked for a government that was working with the Draco. So his job was essentially doing what he was doing. He was pretending to be a spirit guide and telling me that he loved me and that he had been with me and monitoring me since birth, since I came here in this engineered lifetime. And this whole thing was all BS. Yeah. He was there to gain my trust.
Okay.
And he was there to gain my trust, to talk me in, and he was there. I'm sorry, what?
Oh, I'm sorry. Hang on. I think I need to pause. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Yep. Sorry. Just give me 1 moment.
I'll do that. So you ready to go?
Okay. Yeah, ready to go. I'm so sorry.
That's fine. So anyway, they were conditioning me to leave, and I had these 3 positive ETs that were coming through. Now at this point, I met my friend who you've met, I call my project partner, but he's, you know, we're not really doing a project right now. We're both been sick. So, you know,
I'd like to be involved because you both help. I want to help you guys, or, you know, be a part of it.
Well, when he feels better, we can all do a podcast together and you can hear his story. So
yeah, for sure.
How it ties into mine.
Okay.
So anyway, during this process of these extraterrestrials coming through, and there was the one of them was Orban. He was a guardian that was assigned to me, that it was there. And see, first it was the CB, and they took her away. And then Ashtari was there, and then they took him away. And then I got Orban, and then they took him away. And why they took him away is because they were giving me information that they weren't supposed to. So when they were telling, they would give me the bullshit, and then slip in the truth. And then the AI would step in and actually censor what they were saying. So it was like talking live on YouTube and having YouTube censor you, or having a cell phone where the cell phone provider, or the National Spying Agency, or NSA, or National Security Agency, was actually editing and altering your conversation in real time. So the person listening to you, when you got to the point where you were talking about like something the government didn't want you to talk about, the actual voice that you're listening to would break up. And so I was actually getting AI interference in the telepathy, which was explained to me that we were connecting through an AI filter. You know, so it was like they were on their planet, but they were connecting telepathically with me. But the system that creates the simulation and the prison we're in, which is that thing that Yemi had actually remote viewed, was actually filtering our conversation. So when they would say something they weren't supposed to, they would cut them off. And sometimes I wouldn't hear from them from a day or two. And then they would take them away when they broke enough rules, and they did enough. That's it. You're not talking to him anymore. And they'd send somebody in. Else would come in. So I had 3 of them, but I also had a lot of different I had personnel that I later identified was from the White Sands base. I had AI entities. I had a variety of ETs that were at the base that were talking to me as well. And it was all done to basically confuse me. And I started doing, at the time this was going on, I was doing interviews with Robert Kalil on the Typical Skeptic podcast. And I was talking about councils and Orion Council, and there was this conspiracy against me, but this was all part of the mind control and the programming. So the first couple of interviews I did with him, I was completely mind controlled by these assholes. And I was with a friend. Her name was Diane Elwood. Diane and I had met under a Leak Project video. It was a Michael Lee Hill interview. And I started this big conversation under his interview about the Anunnaki programming. And people came forward you could still dig this up if you look deep enough in the comment section for Haujean Contactee or the Michael Lee Hill interview on the Leak Project with Rex Bear. You'll find this conversation. It went on for like 6 or 7 days that I kept going back to this conversation. It was like this big conversation about Anunnaki programming and negative ETs and mind control underneath the video, right? So that's how I met Diane, and Diane was actually a spouse. It was from this past life, and a member of the six that I talked about, which includes myself. She was tasked with coming here and getting me out of the situation. She wasn't somebody that was hijacked, but she was psychic. But she was one of these people that, don't pose a threat, but also the type of person that they have traps set for, such as the New Age movement, such as bad relationships, things like that. If they can pair you up with a narcissist, they can completely ruin your life and prevent you from doing things that are a threat to them. And this is where the handlers come in, because some handlers are in fact not actively working for the government, but they're subconsciously manipulated, and you're manipulated and programmed in some ways remotely to meet them and be in a toxic relationship that drags you down and prevents you from being an agent of change. So that's one of the ways they target people who aren't hijacked, that do have potential, that they feel that is a threat to the system. Because they're doing an oppositional negative social engineering, and the other side is trying to do positive social engineering to liberate the planet and change the human condition, to undermine the program that makes our life a living hell.
Yes.
So anyway, it got down to finally I had Orban, and Orban was really working hard to get me to wake up and to realize things. And through this process, I was told that I was a prisoner. I didn't quite understand it, because that person got immediately removed. He's like, "You are a prisoner," and boop, he was gone. And so, Orban and Ashchari, and I had some amazing discussions with Ashchari. He told me about how he had to incarnate during World War II in Nazi Germany as a gay man, and how he had to hide from the SS because they would execute you. And now he had a relationship that he was celibate and lonely for a long time. And he finally met someone, and they had to hide their relationship and pretend just to be roommates just to survive in Nazi Germany. We had all these discussions about that and lots of things. I mean, this went on for months, that I would have these, and it would be all day long. And sometimes during the night, we would have these telepathic conversations, and I would learn things about him, about myself, but he couldn't tell me who he was, and I didn't find out and remember until after all this ended. But eventually, I got to the point where, they had exhausted every attempt to stop me from doing a podcast. So I kept persevering and pushing forward. That's when, right around that time, sometime before that, actually, as I went public, I was told to go into Project Avalon and ask for help and look for help. So over the course of the year, I guess, that I did this, they paired me up with somebody that they were controlling that wasn't much of any help for me. But later on, I met my project partner, and he was a long-term member of Project Avalon and knew a lot of the people in it, the main people and stuff that were connected, to Bill Ryan and things. And he recognized that he needed to help me, so we started to work together, and he started doing these what I call psychic counseling. He refers to it as gnosis. So what it is he'll do a psychic reading, or he'll sense things about you, and he'll give you little nudges, like little clues, and he kind of leads you along to kind of help you remember. And what he was doing was deprogramming me, to letting me know that these ETs that I was dealing with wasn't something positive, that it was negative. It was Dracos, and it was the Greys. And he had also told me too, he said, I've been attacked by super soldiers telepathically in a psychic attacks, along with accompanied by Dracos. So I did a podcast. I forget what I called it. I think it was Psychic Warfare or something. I talked about the possibility that the star seeds, which actually were the Milabs, the angelics, which I didn't even understand this at the time, were actually here to overthrow the Draco and take them out, to kill them in dumbs by inducing cardiac arrest, using channeling God's energy and wiping out the entire dumb population. Sounds funny, like dumb people, but no, it's actually deep
Mm.
underground military base populations.
Yeah.
There's also bases that aren't military bases. They're alien bases that were here well before there was a U.S. military, any military bases. So you have all those. So there was, the ETs actually made me aware that I was sent here to do that, and that they had hijacked me under Project Ibis. Essentially, this is
Yeah.
what I found out.
Yep.
What happened was, and how this all came out is that Diane came into my life, and we did 4 podcasts together, and a 5th one that just fizzled out. I never published it. And we stayed friends and everything. And then I started getting these attacks as I met my friend in Project Avalon, and things got worse for me. The attacks ramped up. I started to wake up more, because now I was gaslighting these beings, and the more I did, the more I got punished. So I realized they weren't positive. But eventually what happened is that they brought my higher self out during this process of trying to get me to leave. And my higher self was under a controlled state of consciousness and was supposed to convince me that it was time to go home. But in fact, what my higher self did was break the AI programming and actually give me information. And at that point, I started to get severely attacked. I mean, like physically attacked, where they were attacking my ankle. I could barely walk. They were inflicting severe pain and swelling. Literally my ankle took almost 8 months to heal. It was swollen for literally almost 8 months.
Wow.
And I had long-term, and it hurt up until just like 6 months ago. I was still having residual problems because there was tissue damage involved in this. So I had Diane. I'm like, Diane, you've done some psychic healings on me and stuff. And she had connected with my higher self, and my higher self actually looked like me, was presenting itself as me. But she had never interacted with somebody where the higher self comes alive and like literally holds hands with her on the astral.
Oh my God.
I knew something was different about me. And we started to remember at an emotional level that we were connected in a relationship. So this became a love bite, because they had brought this out. And this was the 3rd love bite. So they were trying to sabotage this and use her again to sabotage my marriage, and then put me in this situation. And we both went through this emotional memory recall, and we realized that we had lived in Egypt. We're in a priesthood together, and that's how we first met. And there was one of these life missions, and there's probably good chance that I was hijacked in that mission. I don't know. But we were in the Egyptian priesthood together, and we were executed for not carrying out a human sacrifice.
Yep.
If you didn't follow orders, they killed you, essentially. And how you got into the priesthood is that if you exhibited psychic abilities, then you were turned over to the temple, to the priest. And then they would raise you in the temple, and then you'd become a member of the priesthood, and they'd give you an arranged marriage. So that's how we met. And we both kind of came to that conclusion at the same time, because we were just, both obsessed with Egypt and everything. So they were doing all this shit, and using that as a 3rd love bite.
Okay.
Try to derail what she was doing, because at this point now you've got conflict. You've got her coming in, you got my other friend coming in, and he turned out to be somebody that I had done a lot of different social engineering work on the earth with in past lifetimes, where I was either on the other side helping him, or we were both here together, and he may have helped me where I was here and he wasn't. So, it's like that remote telepathic angel in your head, like helping you out to do something, be an agent of change type thing. So we're like partners in crime for a very long time. And if you want to define crime as doing positive things on this planet.
Yeah.
So anyway, my higher self started to go rogue, and this kind of got to the point where, I had this ET come through who was actually a positive one. And he told me, and my higher self said the same thing. They said, your life's going to dramatically change in 3 months. And I said, well, what if it doesn't? They said, prepare to go home, prepare to die.
Wow.
So 3 months exactly, almost 3 months exactly later, all this shit came to a head. I had asked Diane to check on this injury that I had that they had did to me. And I'd seen it, put them on. It was a Draco put on this ring. It looked like a yellow ring of light that went around my right ankle. It was excruciating pain from the minute it went on, and it just kept getting worse. So when she did a psychic viewing of me, she saw me not as the higher self. She saw me laying on a gurney in a military base in a big room with Dracos, and we're talking the gargoyle looking ones with the wings. They're big.
Yeah.
Those human ETs and military personnel and people in lab outfits, like lab coats, white outfits, things like that. And there were workstations. And I know what this looks like because I was shown this once things really hit the fan. I was getting lots of attacks and lots of telepathic contact from the base. And they showed my naked body laying on a gurney in a room with rows of gurneys and other bodies. And these were all people that have been there in Project Alpha that had went rogue, and they couldn't control their higher self anymore. So their consciousness was now no longer an asset. It was a detriment to the program. So they had created this system where this program where they literally just would have these clones that they could use like a remote voodoo doll and inflict tissue damage and other mind control things like that. So and they were all under controlled state of consciousness like zombies. In this body that they were doing this to, this clone version of myself, this piece of my consciousness was laying on this gurney naked, and they were mutilating my genitalia with needles, and they were probing my spine with a large needle, and I was getting electrical shocks down my legs, and I was getting groin pain, like because they literally showed them piercing one of my testicles with a large needle that looked like a flavor injector. Like there those flavor injectors like they have like for injecting soy sauce into a rotisserie chicken, for example. It was one of those big ones.
Oh, okay. I think I know. Yep.
And my legs were spread, and there was a one of those pads that they use, an absorbent pad in like surgeries, and you go in a doctor's office,
Yeah.
procedure that was under my rear end and underneath my upper thighs. And it was covered in blood. It was a pool of blood about the size of a medium pizza.
Oh my God.
And it was a little short Draco, and he was like screaming maniacally at me, and I'm like challenging him, like, yeah, bring it on, like do it some more. And I was getting into his head, and he would scream at me, and so I was, standing up to them this whole time. I've never had any fear dealing with these entities. It's always been just, total resistance when I realized what they were. Up to that point, it was like I was trying to work with them. I thought that there was something that wasn't right, but, I was supposed to be doing this and cooperating. That's the mind control, because mind control is the art of making someone lie to their self perpetually, and they have to continue to push bullshit on you to keep the mind control going. It has to be kind of like, it's like it needs patches or downloads. You need more BS to keep you under the spell.
Yeah,
and you
right.
have to, and it's to get you to lie to yourself. So when you see things that don't make sense and are discrepancies, you just ignore them, and you make excuses for yourself as to why it isn't what you're perceiving isn't what's really happening, and you need to think the other way. So anyway, my higher self essentially started to break the programming, and she saw this whole thing, and then she had these series of downloads, psychic downloads, where she saw the whole program, and she sent me a series of text messages while she was getting the downloads. And she talked about, she recounted things that weren't even in the text messages about how they use portals, where you can go in an elevator and come out, and like you're no longer in a building. In New York City, for example, you're now at the White Sands base, because you just walk through a doorway. They can create remote portals, remotely controlled portals, where you can literally walk out a door in the base and be wherever you need to be to carry out their operation. If you're there to kill somebody, you go through a portal, you go back, you exit through a portal to kill them, you enter a portal to go back to the base. That's literally the technology that they've got. And I had many, many dreams of that military base, where every time I would always find the base in an urban setting. There was always some portal entry to get to the base. Sometimes it was a cave passage, but other times it was a New York City subway. One time I was in a subway, and I went into a boiler room and went into like a hatch or something in the floor or whatever it was. And there I was in the base again. And I kept coming to this metal door at this trunk passage of a cave. And I kept going through this door, many, many nights with these lucid dreams that were implanted dreamscapes that they were inducing in me, most likely. And as part of this controlled awakening process that I've already talked about. And so that's what was happening. But anyway, my higher self, in the midst of all this stuff, became independent fully at this point, and then was shut and was no longer shut down, because they took my higher self away and they had control. But then when it came back, it was different. I initially heard my higher self as a woman's voice, because my soul is predominantly female and my higher self's female when it chooses to be, but mostly it's female. And I have two personas. I have Yaya said, or Yaya for short, which is my female Haujean name, and then I have Zeli, which is the male Haujean name. They're both two personas that I shift back and forth in my existence over eons of time. So as well as being other members of other races and things, I've done a lot of things and been a lot of things. So it's not just one particular race or soul group. But anyway, I was told to burn the silver cords, and I contacted. I remember sending. I sent the text, to Diane, and I contacted my friend, my psychic mentor, and I spoke to Dean, which is his name. I talked to him, and I said, I'm being told to burn these cords, and then I started to burn them, and I burnt a couple, and then they reattached, and my higher self was now awake and aware and telling me to do this. And now at this point, shit's hitting the fan. The next day, I go to the cardiologist, the second doctor's appointment I've had for heart failure. This was the second round of it. They induced heart failure in me again, a second time. And they were slowly killing me and telling me they were going to kill me and telling me that this was it. And so I was told to burn the cords. So when I started to burn the cords, I burnt a few, they reattached. The next day I'm at the cardiologist's office, and the appointment goes perfect. I'm like totally floored. It's like the doctor did everything they're supposed to. It's like the first time I've had a doctor, a specialist, one of the few times, not the first, but one of the few, actually do their job and tell me what I expected to hear, and made me feel confident. And as we were leaving the doctor's office, this voice, which actually started talking to me as I pulled in the parking lot, which was a smooth Draco. He was like the negotiator.